This is Naoki Yoshida.
This is Fern Halls.
And you are listening to Aetheryte Radio.
Aetheryte Radio.
Here we go.
Hey everybody, what's up? We're Aetheryte Radio, Gamerscape's Final Fantasy XIV podcast. I am Zanidra. I have to this direction my lovely friend Aldino, and to this direction my lovely friend Rook. And today we got some guests. We have Alchamee and extra credits Will parentheses.
Well,
Yeah.
Say hi, guys.
Hello.
hi guys.
Thanks.
Well done. Yes, nailed it.
Doing
The first
just
test.
perfect. Yes.
Mandatory. All right, and there's the one terrible pun-like joke.
No,
and
please,
I won't do it.
more terrible puns
need all of
for
them.
the
Oh, good.
entirety of the
It's
show.
fine. Don't worry
Oh
about it. You'll
no,
fit right
you
in
gave
here.
him consent for that.
I love a terrible pun. I can't lie.
Yes.
Can't do it. All right. Today's episode is about, oh my gosh, Charles came up with this really cool name. It's the roll roadmap on the
Right.
way to the Dawntrail. Again, I love a terrible pun, so that's what
I
it
was
is.
thinking job journey. That was another one. Alliteration is key, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, this one is for healers, so we brought in some healers to help us talk about healing, as you might imagine. But before we get to that, we got some news, so we're gonna roll through that real quick, and then we'll get on to the actually interesting part. Yay! So, as you may or may not be aware, the new and improved Moogle Treasure Trove is happening. It's still going on until March 11th, so you have 2 days. If you haven't done it at all and you want some of that stuff, get on it. May I suggest Gates? They also have this. I didn't do it until this week either, you guys. So
Yeah, don't worry. You're good. You're good,
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
Just, get it in there. There's a lot of options,
we do,
more than
so we do.
ever.
make sure you check out the new book that they've included, because they have some really nice like bonuses in there. You go do like Sophia, for example, and there's like, here's 20 tomes, and it's like, oh, thank God. The 14, nope, not that one. The 15 event is returning on March 13th, which ends in 5 days. You can speak to Kipajakya in Olda. And the rewards are Lucian Prince's attire set and the Regalia Type G mount, which is the coolest mount, kind of, sort of. I mean, I think it's the coolest multiple person mount. 4 is a good number of people to be able to drag it around with you. Just saying.
Yeah. Go get your friends who are doing the Xbox beta.
Yeah, I just want to know how Popotos reach the pedals when we're standing on the seat. Yoshi P, please, deep Popoto driving lore. I need it. I don't understand. Do we have like hand controls? Because that'd be fine. But like otherwise, I'm afraid I'm gonna like crash into a tree in the middle of this house route.
Still.
So.
There's just there's little like foot attachments.
Yeah.
Just
Oh, like
stilts
stilts,
you put on.
like a short round from Indiana Jones, like that.
yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
great,
It's like-
awesome.
See, I always thought it was like Aether in some way. I just imagine Yoshi P as the ancient aliens guy that's just going Aether. That's it. Don't worry about it. That's how you do it.
They got
Yeah.
little buttons on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the steering wheel buttons idea. I think that
Must
was a
be.
good one.
A little bit simpler. All right, patch 6.58 is confirmed to be coming out March 19th. Got like a week and a half for that. We're getting a couple of things. Getting increased echo strength in Pandemonium and Abysso Savage, which is cool, I suppose. If you want to just go in there and grind through stuff real quick. Adjustments to PvP actions. Also, Crystalline Conflict Season 10 ends. So I think this is the one where you need to have finished your little Battle Pass doodle.
Every single time, I'm like, the rewards are going away. They're not going away. It's ending, but it's not. But the season is still. But you can get the battle pass. I do actually think this time is the reset for
I
the
think it is,
battle
yeah.
pass. So
Yes.
the
Because I
battle
was
pass
freaking
doesn't
out
work.
last time, and then somebody was like, no, it's not this time. So it must be this time, right? Because it's
It's
every
gotta
one.
be. Yeah,
I've
but,
already finished my. Yeah.
Me too. I hope everybody.
I'm proud of us.
I like that Alchemy's like, yeah, totally.
I don't PvP.
The change to frontline to make frontline count for
Yep.
bonus on the pass was the biggest godsend.
That's what I
'cause-
did this time.
Yeah.
Except for the very, very, very last one. I was like, I'm short like 500 thingamabobs. Let's do one crystalline conflict.
Yeah,
But really,
and
like, you have so long. You can do one frontline a day and forget like half of the days and still accomplish it.
Yes, yeah. There is a really nice role locked, gender locked, non-gender locked, non-role locked, non-job locked gear set that comes from it. So if you haven't gone for that yet and you want to get it, see if you can get it before then. But don't destroy yourselves trying to earn what you need for it.
Especially if you don't think you're gonna make it because you destroy yourself and then you don't get it. Oof.
Yeah.
Oof. Worst feeling. Don't do it. I'm sorry, Rook.
It's okay. It's happened to me once or twice. It's fine. I'll be fine.
They also say they're going to address a number of known issues and don't say what they are, but there are some known issues and they're going to be addressed.
Are you fixing the raid book? The raid summoner book that when you dye it inverts the inside colors? No, because nobody knows this bug exists with me. That's
Have you gone to the forums? You're like, no, I don't care about summoner anymore.
I made a bug report. Okay.
Okay.
I'm proud of you.
They found it. They went threw it away.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's from that Aldiano guy. No.
Who cares about that?
They just look you in the eye and they crumple the bug report up,
Yeah.
just like your dreams, and then they throw it on the ground while maintaining eye contact, and they T-pose to assert dominance.
Oh,
Yes.
There we go.
I don't like any of that. I'm also hoping they didn't say this, but I'm also hoping they're gonna unlock Thalia and
Sure.
do the mount tome turn-ins for Zeramis because I got 100 of those chilling in my inventory. They need to go away. Farming that, I didn't realize that you couldn't turn those in yet, and then I went to, and it was like, you could hold on to those.
You could still just continue to farm it and hope that you get the drop.
No.
It's like, I'm done.
Like, I've done my time.
I'm not gonna lie, I did enough to get all of those tomes, and in all of that time, I saw one mount drop.
Mm-hmm.
One! So I love
done.
that
Alk was
I'll
like,
have
you're
patience.
trying. You're like, I'm going to help turn this around. I'm going to turn the situation around. Zinnidra's like, no, absolutely not. No.
No. But
Will
you know
not
what? If
continue.
you're not me and you still have the drive and energy and hope to do some more Zeramis, I've heard that there's an event happening where you could maybe get help with that. If you want to talk about it. I don't know.
Want to talk about the event?
It's fine.
Is there an event that's happening that one of us is doing?
I thought so, but I guess I'm a crazy person. I don't know, just hit me up and I'll help you or something. That's the new event.
Yeah,
Woo!
DM Zinidra and she'll get you that clear.
Yeah.
Personally,
Yeah.
you're gonna two-person it, right? You're gonna.
Oh, yeah.
right.
Yeah. We'll unsync
don't-
it and still get our asses handed to us. Yes. It's not
Don't
that you
look
can
at
do
me.
yet.
I have 0 mounts from any of the expansions. As Zinidra could tell you, we would do the mount farming, and I would say, no, I am not picking up a mount. I don't care. We will do this 7 times, not 8, so I can escape as soon as possible.
It's true.
So that's me.
I have them all.
Yeah.
I still think that this one is goofy looking, but it is what it is.
what was it?
Actually, the dragon.
Apocryphal Bahamut?
The
Is that
dragon
what
is
it's called?
actually
Yeah.
really cool looking, but the fact that it's holding a chair
Yeah.
is really dorky looking.
Yeah.
It's hunched over and
He's full shrimp mode.
Yes.
and the place I see it most often is in PvP, where it shows everyone on the entire map where you are in frontline because it's so flippin'
So
tall.
big.
I'm riding the golden sheep or the
Right.
crab
Yeah,
or
I
something,
ride the
but
broom.
definitely not the giant towering thing.
They're just proud. They want to show it off, and that's fine.
I
To
will
me-
never be over the fact that they did not give us a Coral Regina mount for this
Sure.
one with the
Yeah.
cats. I was just like, this is it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to grind the mounts again. I've waited for this for years. And then it was like, here's this dragon. And I was like, but they're cats. But it's cats.
It's
This
weird that you are
expansion.
upset about a dragon. Just saying.
I love dragons. Don't get me wrong. And I was hoping that we would get a beautiful golden glowing dragon, not Robo Dragon Transformer style from the dragon mounts that
Right.
we had. But they got me with this one. Normally I'd be so excited about a dragon mount, but I've wanted that Coral Regina mount for so long. I really thought this was it.
But this is Final Fantasy IV Bahamut. Everybody wanted.
Again, the
Nobody-
dragon looks cool. If I
Yeah.
were standing on the dragon's neck or something, that's fine. I do not want to stand or sit in this little chair that he's holding where it looks like he's like, hey, look at my treasure. It's weird.
I think they might just be waiting for the core Regina so that they can program seats into the horns. so that
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's a multi-seater, right? So like you can ride on its back, and then like all of your friends can like sit in the horns.
That would be okay. You know what? It'd be
Wait.
worth the wait if that was
Yeah,
the case.
right. It'd be
It would
great.
be worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be like a
So Square
Cerberus.
Enix, you heard
Yeah.
this.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Obviously, Square is listening right now. You can have that idea. You're welcome, Square.
All right. The other big one that we've been talking about for weeks. So, like, if you haven't been paying attention, this is on you guys. You'll no longer be able to play Final Fantasy XIV using Windows, 32-bit OS, and DirectX 9 applications, starting with patch 6.58. So,
Yeah.
update. I hope that you have good computer time, because we're about to get pretty, and you need a better computer to be pretty. That's weird, but true. Final Fantasy XIV Xbox Series XS version release. We did this before. What is up with this symbol? Either way, it's
Oh,
March 21st, which is very
About
soon.
hype.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen so many new people on the Xbox beta, right? Like,
Mhm.
Reddit all of a sudden was on fire. I mean, Reddit's always on fire, but just with so many new people going, oh man, I finally get to try this game, and I'm so happy, and I finally got Glamour, look at this, and the community helping as we always do, right? So it's just great to see that influx, and nothing broke that I know of.
Hey.
Mm,
DSR's
yeah.
been a little laggy.
Oh no.
Oh no.
yeah. Some
Since the
of
beta, we actually had 2 nights that were I was using Suiton, but it was showing the Raiton and the Suiton animation.
No.
And then last week, our Gunbreaker was doing everything by muscle memory
Mm.
because it was lagging so bad. So
Oh.
Oh no.
it's
I had
been
to
a
do
little
that.
rough, but we're adjusting.
I had to do
I
that
feel
back
like-
Oh, you go.
I feel like this is a routine problem for 14 at this point,
Yeah.
right? We have enough servers for all of the players that could possibly want to play our amazing award-winning game. Oh, no, we don't. Oh, God, someone feed the hamsters extra. Like, I don't know what we're going to do, but, like, we got to soup it up. At least this time, hopefully, the supply line problems won't prevent them from just eating more servers at it. Or, we could make all the Xbox players play on Dynamis, so...
Yeah, great. We'll
Yeah,
shift them all over to
shove them all over-
Dynamis.
Yeah, right, it'll be great.
This has been the plan all along. No, I
There's
mean,
server space over there. It's fine.
yeah, easy.
Well, that's what the cloud servers are for.
Yeah.
Exactly.
One day.
And that's what some of those tests and things I think have been to kind of pave the way for. Of course, it means that we have to kind of hang in there until then. But theoretically, once that actually is implemented, I think it will make a huge difference in these kinds of weird situations that we've had for so long in 14.
There's also there are some things that are outside Square's control. There is a
Yeah,
network
absolutely.
node near the server center
Mhm.
that sucks. It just sucks. And when it has a bad day, everyone has a bad day.
Yes.
Well, specifically, half of everyone has a bad day. It's
Yeah.
about 50-50 on whether or not you're getting routed through that node and get kicked out. And your friends are like, I don't see what the problem is. Everything's fine for me. And I'm like, you are literally hanging in midair like it's the Matrix. What are you talking about? And they're like, I don't see it. It's fine.
Yeah.
I don't have personal experience with this trying to heal in 10 at all or anything like that.
Are you
That's
fibbing?
fine.
I love scaring people because I basically
eyes got
live
real
in
big.
the server. I live very, very close to the North American servers, and when I'm raiding, it's like people be like, "Oh no, why are you over? Oh, you moved? Yeah, what are you talking about? I don't see that on my screen." Because I am like, I never go through that node. There's no way that I can. So people just see me in all different spots, and they're like, "Wait, you made it through the mechanic though?" Yeah, where was I to you? Yeah, I got the heal.
Yeah.
Sounds like a certain person in our static
Oh yeah.
must live in the server room because he somehow manages to dodge everything.
Must be nice.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this a little bit last time we brought this up, but people were like, "Do you have to pay the sub and get the battle pass stuff?
Mhm.
Not battle pass. Game Pass.
Game Pass.
Yeah. So, what has been posted is that Final Fantasy XIV Starter Edition, which includes A Realm Reborn, Heavensward, and Stormblood, not all of them, will be available for free as an Xbox Game Pass Ultimate perk for a limited time. So that's what they're giving as part of their like, hey, don't hate us.
Yeah.
Here's the game. You have to pay for all these things, but here it is. And that limited time will be from March 21st to April 19th. So it's about a month. pretty limited, all things considered.
Right.
If you show up to the game late, you are not going to get this kind of nice bonus. But theoretically, if you're excited about Xbox, there's a good chunk of people who already have the game anyway.
Right.
Hey, we have holidays coming up. Little Ladies' Day.
Holidays.
Holidays.
Yeah. They're smooshing them together. We got Little Ladies' Day and Hatching Tide, and they're smashing those guys together. It's going to be from March 14th all the way to April 1st. We're going to have the one in Makedo's Amphitheater. So Gridania will be decorated for Hatching Tide, and Alda will be decorated for Little Ladies' Day. And everywhere else is going to be both at different times. So Limsa and all the housing areas will be from March 14th to the 22nd. And then from the 22nd to the 1st, there'll be Hatching Tide. So that's just because Limsa is the best and gets both.
Oh, see, I knew that was going to happen.
Oh, I see.
I
Okay.
knew you
Oh,
were
that's why. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But the actual event to go and get the reward is in Makedo's Amphitheater from Gili Aliapo. The reward is, this is such a cute name, Petey Horn. It's a gubu with a flower crown, pink flower crown. So depending on how you feel about gubu, not as cute as the name, but Petey is just a cute name for a gubu. Like a Pete Moss boy.
I think it's a recolor of the
Absolutely.
the mount that you get from the sylphs, right?
I think the flowers are a little different, but the gubu is pink at the top and gradients down into regular.
Yeah, there's been a bit of discussion about this.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, we know there is another event coming that's kind of a special one with the 16 collab and crossover that's going to be occurring. So because of that, as well as kind of I think where the holidays fell this year in the same month, we have these two being combined into one and this kind of reskin mount. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not that might be because they don't want to create a whole bunch of new assets while they are also trying to do stuff with the graphical update or all kinds of things, right? And I think that, as always, there are a lot of different things that go into this that we as players on our end just don't fully get. But a lot of conversations happening around the idea, especially in post-Endwalker, about how they've kind of condensed some things, or perhaps events don't feel as rewarding to some as they used to, or that, when we are kind of in a big lull leading up to an expansion, that it would have been nice to have kind of separate holidays. I don't know how everybody else is feeling about this. I think I'm kind of on the fence where I'm just it's fine. I would have just blasted the event and gotten the reward. I wish they were a little bit more rewarding. I wish that maybe we got a little bit more from this one, sure. But especially knowing that the 16 collabs on the horizon, I'm not too fussed. But I do think it's been a fair observation by some, perhaps,
For
that
me, it's more
feels a little weird.
The expansion's coming out, and if they need to cut a corner on a holiday event, that's okay. I kind of wish that we'd gotten items for both holidays. Petey's cute and all, but I already have 2 gubus. I want some more cute flower accessories from Little Ladies' Day. Just saying.
I think the one thing that if you're watching a podcast about Final Fantasy XIV or on a podcast about Final Fantasy XIV, you're probably not in the casual end of the player base, right?
Theoretically.
Right. You're probably at least in the top 50%. How many people haven't done the Sylph ARR tribe quests all the way through to get them out, right? So, while it feels like a reskin for some of the hardcore people, for other people, it's a way to not have to do that tribe quest, right? Which some people just really don't like, and it's not a thing that they want to do, and that's fine, right? And this is a way to get something like that cool Gubu mount so they can participate in the yearly reenactment of the Great Gubu Wall that I'm sure happens somewhere. Right.
Oh, yes.
I like that Chad is me, I haven't.
Yeah.
And then Alchamee's in here I have not either.
No, I've done all of the tribes except for the ARR tribes.
Yes, big mood. Oh my gosh. They're so long. I keep hoping that someday
They're very
they'll
long.
condense the amount that you
Right.
need for the ARR tribes, because it's just so many.
No.
Well, okay, so let me tempt you with something that's not a mount. Reminder that you get exclusive access to the die shops
Yep.
if you finish the ARR tribes, right? That's the
true.
real reason to do it. It's not the mounts. It's a pretty good story, but it's actually the die shop, right?
Yes, true.
I actually
They started to put some of those in Island Sanctuary, so There's
I
that.
did do all of the tribe quests when they were first coming out because you basically needed to work on the relic at the time to speed it along. It was fun, but it was very, very long. And when they started introducing the next expansion's tribe quests, and they were so quick in comparison, I was like, thank God! Oh my goodness! So yes, they are super long, but I mean and you know what? They're hard, quote unquote, harder than the ones we have currently as well. Like the ones we
by
have now are
design.
very, very one and done. The ones then, there were some mixed in there that were like, you have to be invisible and also not get caught and also do it fast enough and not drop this thing that you're holding so you can't actually do anything else but also walk with this while you're invisible. It was annoying, to be honest, but
Or camp this one fate for the item that you can only get from that one fate, and it will refuse to spawn. So you're like, I'm just going to pass on this one for today because I'm not waiting an hour for a fate to spawn for this.
some
I don't know, I
days
got
some
time
days
for
you
that.
like if you were running through there and you didn't have that one that day, you'd just stop and do the fate anyway, so you'd have the item for the next day. Those are not good now that I'm thinking about it. Like maybe just do this event and have a goo. Congratulations,
Yeah,
you didn't
there
have
you
to
go.
do that crap. This one's cuter anyway.
It is.
Whew. Anyway, I'm a little bummed that we don't have the Little Ladies Day prizes because they're usually very like pretty things, or like the fan dance we got last time. That was cool. I liked that. But you know, it is what it is, and if it's gonna make Dawntrail better, cool. I'm in. Let's go. Let's explore. Our last big thing here is the 10th anniversary 14-hour broadcast is happening April 12th at 8 p.m. PDT. What are they going to talk about? We don't know. Maybe more Dawntrail stuff, or maybe stuff from the past. If you want to find out. 8 p.m. PDT April 12th. Check out the information on Lodestone. But
wait
really,
for the-
that's all that's there.
Random dev that comes on that gives us a revelation about why they did something. You know, like when we got what was it, the Tempest and the height difference and like the caustics on the ground, when they really go into detail that nobody cares about. That's what I want to see. That's what I'm waiting
It's cool
for.
stuff. It's cool stuff.
Yeah.
But it is definitely buried in there.
Oh
Yeah.
yes.
There's a lot of speculation, perhaps, that maybe we'll get the Dawntrail release date in the
Right.
14-hour broadcast. I mean, who knows? We'll see. But either way, I mean, keep an eye out or tune in if you have a chance,
think-
because there's usually some good stuff.
or at least
think
the
at that
media
point-
tour.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah,
going to
media
say.
tour, maybe.
It's April 12th. They gotta tell us what the media tour is, right?
Please.
Or tell us what the pre-order bonus is. Just
Right.
show us the
Oh,
earring. Just show us the
yeah.
earring. Like that's all. Just show us the
The
earring, and
earring.
maybe let us give you money for the earring, right? Like
Yes.
I'll pre-order without
The
a release
green mage
date.
earring, you mean?
Yeah, that
Lizzie
one.
over here. Media
Uh-huh.
tour. What's that?
Uh-huh.
All right, that brings us to our actual topic.
Said
Full
media tour.
roadmap for healers, and that
And it-
also brings us to Charles taking over.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go.
You know, you said media tour and it hit me because this is why we're doing these, right? We want to do a series on all the roles, kind of how they changed in Endwalker, how they are now, what we want to see in the future. Of course, we have to bring people on because I don't heal. That's something I've never done in my life, and I probably won't. I'm a DPS, let's say, parse brain lizard. So that's who I am. But Endwalker healing. So the first thing that I really wanted to hit on, because this just generated so much talk in the kind of run up to Endwalker. Shield, pure, healer split. How did you feel about that going in? How did it end up being? We have Alchemee and Will, who are co-healers. How's it going? How'd it be?
You
How
want
is
to go
it?
first?
Sure. I think on the division it is fine.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the reasons that it's fine, at least from my perspective, is that how many of ours did you sage for? So we co-healed 2 tiers, and then Alk moved off to do DPS, and we switched healers for tier 4, and then broke up after 10 because 10. But Sage puts out a higher than expected volume of pure healing. So like it's sort of shield healers and pure healers. It
Right.
feels like, right? And I'm sure we'll I don't know, Alchem, when you want to talk more in depth about dual puring Phoenix, just because stupid check.
Yeah, how does it? How does it fill up to double up? Like, how does it feel
It's
to double up
definitely
on normal?
comfier to do double shield than it is to do double pure. But when we got to P3S, I was kind of swapping between Sage and Scholar depending on the fight. And we got to the mechanic in P3S, and it was like, okay, so we either have to waste our LB3 to heal everybody, or we're just gonna die. Like those are the options. And I was like, because I can't put out enough healing on either Sage or Scholar, and with the debuff, together we couldn't. So
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? I played Nocturnal Astro in Shadowbringers.
Or 1 out.
Let me try. I know, rest in peace. I was like, and he wasn't super comfy on any shield healers yet. He had really only played White Mage up to that point. And I was like, let's just try pure. And I was like, what I'm gonna do is we're gonna take neutral sect and we're gonna pretend like it's my Nocturnal and we're gonna use it for shields and nothing else. And it worked. We got through the mechanic, we got through the fight. It was a little adjustment, but I think Astro has a lot better healing tools than people give it credit for. And it was I won't say it was comfy, but it did work.
I think the
Go ahead.
the shield healers feel like they have more healing than the pure healers have, the shield healers have more pure healing than the pure healers have mitigation, right? Because
Yes,
on White Mage, I've got Wings, Aqua Veil, and 2 charges of Divine Benison, and I can pray really hard that you live, right? As long as you're alive, it's fine, right? Not dead, I can fix. Keeping you alive is like a little difficult sometimes, right? Like it's very reactive compared to like either Scholar or Sage, where I'm just like shield.
Or Astro. Which
Yeah,
is
or
actually
even
what I was
Astro with
gonna
neutral
say,
sect,
like,
yeah.
For a pure healer, Astro is not as reactive, like really at all in comparison to White Mage. All of the stuff is very on a timer if you want to be efficient.
Earth and Star,
very-
horoscope.
Macrocosmos, I see mention of in the chat, right? It's interesting because I mean I totally agree with all the observations. I definitely can say that from having gone through and co-healed and done the shield plus pure healer, right? I think the combo works nicely in tandem together through our raids, especially with some of the extra things we've had kind of emphasized with a lot of damage over time and dots that we're kind of wading through the last handful of tiers, which has given a little bit more, impact to things like layering on the heal over time, or even using some of those new like multi-hit kind of heals and things that we have. And I definitely notice the absence of, I do pure healing. I'm over on that White Mage life too, Will, so I'm right there with you. Like, I definitely notice the absence of shields if, something goes awry or if, there's other things. Now, when it comes to like the intention though of separating them out into, hey, we're really trying to define these niches within the healing genre, right? Kind of like how we have the ranged physical or the caster DPS or I don't totally know if I think that it really did fully do that, because I think your summary, Will, was so on point with the idea that like for shield healers, you have the shielding in a larger amount than, the mitigation that we do get on things like the pure healers. But again, like, is it something where the play style is so radically different between them? A little bit more in certain cases. And it is interesting with Astrologian, because Astrologian does feel as though it almost has a play style more like shield healer, in how you're kind of like anticipating damage and placing it and stuff like that, and then using those kind of recuperative effects or those other things. I mean, of course, there's still good healing and still good responsiveness with it, with things like light speed and other stuff within its kit. But I don't really know if I think this differentiation between shield healer and pure healer is really something that they leaned into as much as they could have if they really wanted those two to have extremely distinctive kits and sort of play styles in it, particularly in regards to the shield healers.
It's come up a little bit, but do you think that pure shield is a misnomer and it really should be reactive proactive or reactive mitigation or triage, something like that.
I mean, right. White Mage is the reactive healer at this
Right.
point, right? And everyone else has to be some amount of proactive, right? So you either have to like recitation, add low spread, right? Or you have to, oh God, when we get to it, we got to talk about pre-pull Sage crit fishing.
Oh goodness, yes.
Right? Alc has
Alchamee's
feelings. Alc has feelings. And even White Mage, right? Bell works best if it's out ahead of time, unless it's a bleed that lasts more than 15 seconds, right? That's like the only case where it's a reactive tool. But it's also a 3-minute cooldown, so I probably want it, like I need to route it ahead of time, right? In anything harder than an extreme, right? An extreme, I can kind of use it reactively, but I don't feel like anything else is reactive. I feel like it's mitigation healing versus you're not dead, you're fine, like juice box healing,
Triage,
right?
yeah.
I guess I'm gonna call it juice box healing, right? Yeah.
Juice box,
Yes,
yeah.
that's a big ouchie boo boo you got there. It's fine. Have a juice box and a band-aid and go back and kill the boss. It's fine, right?
I like to promote that to Square Enix, that we should have juice box healing and mitigation. Thank you. I mean, do you feel as healers that it should be that, the kind of proactive versus reactive? Would that be more fun? Would that,
I think it should be a little bit of both.
Sure.
I do feel, I mean, I'm in DSR right now. No, I'm not healing DSR, but I listen to my healers enough. And I see what's going out. And like, there are instances there where there definitely needs to be proactive healing. There needs to be mitigation. There needs to be shields, or else I literally fell over to variants the other night. Like, one person missed mitt and just dead.
Yeah.
So I think there needs to be a good balance. I think there needs to be a better balance than there is now, to make sure that you need both.
Right.
To make it make more sense.
I think it's interesting because really I think these subcategories mostly have weight because we want different and interesting play styles, right? We want something that differentiates them. Now, does it have to just be that either you are a shield healer or a pure healer? No. Or juice box or a mitigation? No. It's tough because we are in a place where the classes generally are well balanced, right? We're in a place where we have seen that in the vast majority of content. I know there's always room for debate about that, but like when you look at like the grand spectrum of games and balance in games, like
compares to WoW.
Yeah.
Right.
I love you, WoW, but
Right.
But like generally the fine tuning of balance and things like 14 is much more negligible than in other games where like, it's much closer between the different classes. But one of the things we've kind of ended up in, particularly in Endwalker, is that we have a sort of homogenization happening of classes and play styles, as well as skill ceilings in play styles, to try to even the playing field in a way that is effective in certain regards, but less engaging in others. And so I think for me, it's less about wanting them to be categorized as like shields or as pure healing, and more about enjoying distinctive play styles of different classes where it would be fine if we had a shield healer like Sage. I mean, I think in a lot of ways kind of gets towards this, although it, obviously you also have the heals to go with it, but like a playstyle that might be much more proactively based where like you're really playing around those shields and that is the bulk of your healing, that anticipatory kind of stuff is fine with me. If they even wanted to lean so hard into that was like the distinctive characterizing thing and that's how you accomplished it. But as it is right now, I think we just have these categories distinguished because they seem to be the ones that Square Enix has outlined. But I don't even know if they've fully committed to them specifically. So it's less about wanting them and more about just me as a player wanting some differentiation of play style within healing.
I do not want the categories, to be honest. I kind of don't burn me at the stake here, but I kind of like how different the jobs ended up being in comparison to like tanks, for example. Tanks
Sure.
got very, very samey, whereas
Yeah.
healers still have a bit of differentiation. And I totally agree with Rook here. Like, to me, that is the part that makes them interesting. The thing that I think they really messed up on is there's not a lot of balance amongst them. We got like White Mage, that is a very powerful pure healer, and then when you have poor Astro over here that kind of fiddling around, having to honestly do more work than White Mage by a significant amount to do the same sort of healing and damage as well, which that's a whole different kind of work.
Oh, boy.
It's almost not fair, and we see that a lot across the board with different jobs that just have more hitting, healing, tanking, whatever power. I think that rather than worrying about these categories, which kind of ended up not working anyway, maybe they should have been working on the balance between all of them.
I wonder how much of this artificial division in thought that they put into this just so they had an excuse to lean people in towards not doing the Sage Scholar thing because of the shield overwriting, right? Because they obviously can't let them stack, right? They can't let them stack. That's pretty obvious. Just so we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
That's never gonna happen, right? Like with like full shield stacking. There's some shield stacking that can happen, and I've seen
Yeah, like Polos and
right.
Yeah,
I've seen Alc messing around in like rods before stuff, and she's got like 3 or 4 dots after her like shield bar, and you're like, how did you? And she's like, don't worry about it, it's fine. But I think that it's really, you pick one of those, right, and then you can do whatever with the other slot. Is sort of the way it ends up feeling like, right? That there's only one spot for a shield healer because of the overwriting of a thing that's at least theoretically the core mechanic. We can argue about how important Succor and spread shields are to Scholar when we get there. And Alc knows that way better than I do. But I think that that's really where the division comes in more than like the fantasy, right? Like the main reason to pick any class to play is how much do you enjoy the high concept of fantasy of playing that class, right? And of them, it feels like only Scholar really has a class fantasy that entails the big tactician, forward planning mindset, right? Everyone else is kind of read the stars, commune with nature, or pew, 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 lasers.
Yeah.
Right,
And
which
then
is the Sage
Scholar's
class.
like, here's my tactician book
Right.
and also my fairy. Like, which
It does. Oh, Scholar. Yeah, it's funny because its lore definitely gives you some premise, but then you get the whole fairy element. And I think like trying to bring together those two aesthetics or give it something that feels like really distinctive to itself has always been a little bit of a struggle, even as Scholar has played well or been very strong throughout the game. And as we continue to just get more and more fairy lore, the like Scholar itself hasn't necessarily adapted to like reflect more of that, even with things like Alo Alo or the First or the, all of the things we've had with the Pixies or like...
I will never get off of the soapbox, but I really think Scholar is a casualty of not splitting Summoner and Scholar and relying on Arcanist to be there, to be the throughput and the throughfare between both of them. And it sucks. And I know people love to level one job and get the other. I get it. It would help both jobs
but stop it.
so well.
Yeah.
And we'll get the Scholar, but another huge change in Endwalker, was the 1.5 second GCD. Now, okay. I know what it looks like on paper. Faster. Did it actually do anything? Did it actually help? Did it actually really give you any more thought to your DPS rotation?
I'm gonna let
Slidecast.
Will take that one because
Yeah.
he
Will
was
takes
very
now.
proud of his GCD.
Okay, so okay. I gave Alc a bit of a heart attack because she played Ninja for tier 4 for tier 3, and I played White Mage, right? Because when it comes to harder content, I'm not quite a one trick. I can Sage, I can Summoner, right? But I'm comfiest on White Mage. And I did Speed Mage. And that GCD got low, got very low, and I really loved the build for it in Bosia That's really where I learned to like love going fast on White Mage, right? Because you get the full haste build, you get all of the tools, and you just pew 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 Glare Mage.
Yeah.
For me, I think it meant that it wasn't about the damage, it was about the flexibility of OGCD healing, right? Because we got another OGCD heal and an OGCD mitt in Aquavale, right? And it means that we have more weave windows, so we have a little more flexibility. Now, if you go fast enough, you don't actually have weave windows, and don't worry about it. It's fine. I just can't get ass eyes out under presence of mind. No, it's fine. I promise. I feel like I still sidecast everything. Right. Like we got to the point where it was tier 1, I think. We were running Aglaya after raid, and I was still in raid mode, and I spent the entire Aglaya literally slide casting around the boss.
Yep.
Like
Very
I didn't
fancy.
stop.
He did. He used it as practice.
Yeah, it was practice, right? Because like I'm still in Savage mode, and we're running Aglaya, so it's like not exactly the same level of difficulty, right? So you're just slide casting everywhere, and you could argue that it's easier to slide cast, that you get more movement, right, during the downtime, right? Which is nice because there are so many movement heavy things.
Oh, yes.
Right? But still, even with that, I'm thinking like 10, right? There are so many mechanics where you have to be on the middle platform, and then you have to be in your spot on the other platform, and you do not have time to slide cast that.
Yes.
Right? So in some respects, it makes it easier to weave, easier to do other stuff. And in other respects, it doesn't change anything. We're still spamming Dia, right, for any amount, or healing on the go, or burning extra lily charges to get a blood lily lined up. And we'll talk about that later, but like, it doesn't do anything.
Who would overheal to get blood lily?
I'm just gonna say, if it's out under buff, it's technically damage positive. It's fine.
Exactly.
It's fine. Right?
Thank you.
It's damage positive.
Thank you. No, I think those are great observations, right? Because there's this big discussion, and I even see, as we're talking live, or whenever any of you are listening to this after the fact, here in our chat live on stream today, talking about the idea of complexity within DPS rotations versus things like active healing rotation, right? So this reduction with the global cooldown, while yes, in like certain ways, and particularly in certain content, like I love that you brought up Boja, right, where we get these additional tools that can even lean into something like the spell speed, or how you're kind of trying to expedite that as much as possible. Sure, like there's a lot of stuff that can be kind of fun about that and engaging, but when it comes down to it, I don't necessarily know if in most endgame content just reducing that global cooldown has done all that much as far as creating a more engaging DPS kind of situation, because the rotation itself hasn't been added to. It's not like there's more complexity to that. And although I do feel like there are some areas where we've seen perhaps more punishing healing in certain regards, or, certain windows that, like in Savage raids, I'm thinking, what is it at the end of the fight with the spider? What's the one?
Harrowing Hell.
Harrowing Hell. Thank you. I'm just in my head. I'm just like having flashbacks to the Great War.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't even remember the names. So like, we've had some stuff like that even in Savage has felt a little bit closer to some of the ultimate healing requirements, but in very specific places and very specific cadences. So to me, this feels kind of like a bit of a half measure, where either we could get more interesting, engaging, or complex DPS rotations to fill the time between large healing bursts, or we could have higher requirements of throughput healing and more abilities that allow for flexibility of responding to that. Like if I'm healing in WoW or I'm healing in Guild Wars 2, I am healing. Like that is the thing I am doing pretty much 90% of the time, depending on where you are in your optimization, versus something like 14, where I am healing in set bursts and I am DPSing the full rest of the time, if that makes sense.
It's like that in ESO too. A lot of healing, but also a lot of DPS.
I feel like there's a space too, if we lean more into that healing or into the more complex DPS rotation, for more diversity in the healers, right? So imagine that you could do both of those on at least one class. I'm thinking Sage, right? Like right now, Cardia does exactly one thing, and it designates who your little drip healing every time you pew pew someone with some kind of laser goes.
Mhm.
But that's all it's used for, which feels like a waste, right? Because there
Right.
are other things that could affect your Cardia target, right? As an example. And so you could do like a more complex DPS rotation that yielded higher healing than just the thing. Maybe, not as much damage as like a 1-2-3 on a melee would, right? But more healing than 1-1-1 over and over
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
as an example, right? So if we more higher requirements lets them put more variance in that feels meaningfully different.
Mhm. Yeah, because. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, because it's, as not a healer, when you see 1.5 second damage GCD, everyone goes, oh, wow. Like, what, that must have fundamentally changed. And I really wanted to really talk about it because it didn't seem to do much.
Well, so there's 2 classes
Sure.
besides healers with cast bars,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? And one of them only has half of the cast bars, and the other one has legs, which is what our resident friend Thunder calls the rest of the party, because he will be in his ley lines until approximately 1 GCD before he needs to be in the spot, and someone else needs to be in his spot so he can Aether skate to them, right? So we're legs. And that's fine, right? That's like fine, but that's it. It's 4 healers and 2 casters because you can't convince me that Summoner actually has cast bars, right? And then they
A lot
don't.
of them eliminate it with Swift Cast. Anyway.
Right. They've got 4? No, 3.
3.
Yeah, 3 actual cast bars in the full rotation. 2 fire charges and the wind AoE. That's it.
Yeah.
Right? And so it feels like it should be meaningful, but in a context where no one else has them,
Right.
it doesn't really.
I mean, we've already kind of seen the quicker spell speed builds with Astro historically, so like we kind of had an idea of what that looked like already. But now you've just given it to all of them.
Yeah.
Right.
Poor Astro.
Poor Astro. We're gonna get to
Love
that.
Astro so much.
We're just gonna pat it on its head and
Yeah.
Here's
I'm not
another
a healer.
star. Good job.
Those were the 2 global changes that I identified. Were there any others that kind of slipped under the radar, or are we pretty good on global and it's time to get into SAID?
There's one thing that happened across the course of the X Pack,
Sure, yeah.
which we should probably talk about, which is the increase in range of the bubbles.
Right.
The bubbles all
Yes.
got bigger,
Yeah.
and that was actually huge. So the bubbles
Mind-blowing.
were the Alec, what's the name of the one that you set and it pops later for Astro? I always
Earthly
get-
Star.
Earthly
Yeah,
Star.
that one.
Oh, yeah.
Earthly Star, Asylum, and the weird geodesic dome-looking thing for Scholar, right?
Yeah.
You could tell which healers I play and which ones I don't. It's fine. That change was huge. That was an
Right.
absolutely massive change to
Sacred
the
soil. That's it.
yeah, Sacred Soil. And it was absolutely huge because I didn't have to keep yelling at the entire party to get in my bubble. Get in the bubble.
Sometimes they don't have a choice. The bubble's as big as the floor.
Right. And
Yeah.
Astro's bubble is still tiny, so
Yeah.
oh yeah, the T-pose bubble.
Yeah, the
T-pose.
one.
Yeah, T-pose bubble. Right. But that was a really big meaningful change because of the volume of like in out movement mechanics, right? It let Asylum and Sacred Soil and Earthly Star be more useful in more places. And I think that was really good too, especially because unless you're using a boss-centered placement macro or a self-centered placement macro, both of which are fine and there's no problem with that. I don't. But even in those cases, there are times where you want to place it manually. The payout for placing it roughly in the right spot is better because you're not worried about, oh, I accidentally put it in the corner and it doesn't reach anyone anymore, right?
Right.
And so that was kind of the other thing I'd call a global change.
I
It
agree.
happened to the limit break as well, didn't it? I think that was 6.0 that the limit break
Yes.
got huge.
think they increased the radius on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they did.
Yeah, I think the only Savage fight I could think of that really where that mattered was 10. And if I
Yes,
had to
yeah.
healer break in 10, we were already probably on a losing run.
It's
So
I
Yeah.
mean, it has been good, I think, even in some of the pugs or alliance raids, because there would be times where I'd pop that res or something. Although we haven't seen as much of that as, say, like when Fundscape was active when it was first released in Heavensward. Like then the full alliance reses, limit breaks were plentiful, and you had to make so much use of them.
Rook, I don't know when the last time you ran Fundscape and roulettes with a group of people who were not planning to do Fundscape was. But let me assure you, it is still a wipe fest.
It's still spicy, and I love it. I love it.
Diablo still has hands. He has, especially because no one understands that it's a donut.
People haven't had to do it for so long because they've been cheesing it into Labyrinth of the Ancients. Guilty also.
And even Lab of the Ancients lately, I have had groups wipe on Behemoth so many times.
Oh.
I've actually encountered that too recently. I don't know what's going on.
I'm really tempted to make a macro. Please wait behind the purple line at the 3-channel mechanic to avoid a wipe. And then someone inevitably pulls early and we wipe. And I have to go, all right, now what did we learn? And they're like, I didn't know it did that. And I'm like, that's why I said the thing.
It's so interesting.
You can take one step over it. Any more than that, and you are starting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of a combined thing. One, that we have a bunch of new players coming in, and also that we haven't seen as many like full wipe mechanics in things like our current alliance. I mean, the first one that we got, there were some where you get the knockoffs or the things like that. Where we did see those kind of happen, but I feel like it's become less of a thing over time. Whereas, like in Fundscape, the very first boss fight, if you don't stand behind the crystal, you get yeeted off of the platform, and everyone's dead, right? So it's interesting. There's a lot that kind of goes into it, but to kind of circle back, I wanted to touch on the radius extension as well, because I love it. I think overall it's a total net gain, like you were saying, Will. I think that there are certain abilities that if they're in your kit before, they might have been so situational or like so specific that they didn't always feel as relevant within your healing scheme. You know, can I use this as something that I would make use of in this mechanic, because we're all spread across the arena and I don't know if it'll reach them. So this is just like a weird thing that I can only use if we're grouped in one spot for one mechanic or something like that. So in that way, I think the radius has been a big help. In other ways, and they're not as, they don't feel as pressing, because I think, again, the benefits outweigh. But in other ways, I do kind of miss some of the more specific stuff. And I almost hope this is something that we can touch on more as we talk about, you know, theories for our next healer. But I do actually like in games when we have healers or we have buffers or we have stuff like that, where a sense of spatial awareness plays some kind of role. And I did actually really enjoy that for Astrologian in things like Stormblood, because I felt like with my kit, I had a lot of things. If we got knocked back into something, I have that earthly star pre-positioned in the right spot. I pop, we do this, right? So like having things placed in key areas, or knowing how to kind of have this spatial awareness, or even, yes, like having to ask my group to do certain things to optimize that healing, in a lot of ways felt engaging or interesting or strategic or collaborative in, you know, certain regards. And I think that some of, not all, but some of that kind of sense of spatial awareness and strategic placement has been negated by things like this expanded radius, because it's just like, I slap this down, I don't even need to look at the arena, it's fine. But only a little. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, they even increased the radius on Cure 3, which, to be fair, that's not quite as bad as not as extreme, I guess, as the radius expansion on the bubbles, right? But Cure 3 used to be, you need to be in my hitbox. What you heard was near my hitbox. What I said was in my hitbox for this mechanic, because everybody's gonna. I play a Lalafell, right? Pile on the Popito. I've got a little plus above my head. It's a little cross for the healer. Everybody on this spot, because I'm going to do Cure 3 nonsense.
I do think a lot of the radius increase happened because they started to add more interesting arenas, like with P7S or even with P12, with the split arenas and stuff like that. And I think that they were trying to compensate for, your healer cannot always be on you because of how we did this mechanic with this arena. So we need to give you guys some kind of leeway, which, again, you could try to work out some strategic planning with that as well. But I do think there was a little thought there with we're doing fun new things with Arena, so you're not just getting a circle or a square. How can we help kind of mitigate this transition to this new kind of style?
And there's also things like P6's hitbox. 6? Yeah, 6,
true, yeah.
Right? Like the fact that her hitbox is 10 billion yalms wide.
Yes.
Right?
A
And
lot of them
there's
are.
right. Well, a lot. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of them are. I'm thinking of her specifically because you've got in-outs on that, right?
Yeah.
So there are, I think the desire to make us think about where a tool works as opposed to making it so a tool only works on one mechanic. Does that make sense? Right. So
Yeah.
for the in-out mechanic on 6, there are people who are at the corners, more or less, and doing the spot dodges across the line for chorus. And so if they hadn't buffed Asylum, then Asylum couldn't really be used to any effect there because of the required positioning, versus now it can kind of be used there. So we have to make a choice as opposed to not having a choice before. But I overall agree with Rook. I would like more precision tools, right?
So this is neither here nor there as it's applied to healers, but a couple other jobs did get the expansion of the radius as well, including Dancer, which is what I main, if you guys didn't know. The freaking Shield region dance, which I always just call Big Dance! Big Dance!
Yeah.
I can't even remember the name of it.
Improv.
That's it.
Improv.
Yep. So yeah, the range on that got extended, which is, I'm gonna say, nicer than the extension of healer ones, because you could still catch people in healer ones, and people are willing to come in to help, or themselves basically get that heal for a healer. People prior to this expansion, when people standing in that gave me Esprit, they didn't give a crap.
No. No, it's
I need this to do more DPS so we can kill the thing faster. I'm over here and I'm busy and I'm casting and I can't help you. Okay. Well, now it doesn't matter because it doesn't give me a spree anymore. It heals them. And I guess that's probably why they extended the range on it as well. But I'm wondering, all that to say, I'm wondering which came first. Like, I wonder if they were sitting here going, ugh, this thing for Dancer really sucks. How can they make it better? And one of those things was make the range bigger. And then somebody else over in the corner was like, wait, we can't just give that to them. We have to give it to the healers, right? Or if it was the flip-flop of that, where they were like, let's have a little bit of pity. Because everything that I can think of, and this may not be entirely true, but everything that I can think of that got extended was healer-based. Can you guys think of any that aren't?
Yeah, what is it? The stupid buff on Summoner.
Searing Light?
Searing Light, yeah.
Also
that is
healing
humongous
days.
now.
That does some healing stuff.
No, not anymore.
Oh,
no,
what?
it's just it's a damage buff.
Searing Light
Alright,
is 3% for
okay.
30 seconds. I think.
Yeah, if you ever see an icon that looks like Freddie Mercury, that's a buff. That's a buff from Summoner.
Oh, you know what else? The other thing I wanted to mention here was in Zeramis specifically, when you are doing your either stack or spread mechanics in different quadrants with your partner, I am across the arena from our Gunbreaker, who drops a tank mint then, and I never get that tank mint. So I always come back to the group and have more damage than everyone else. I don't know how the other person, you know what? I do. They're a healer. They're fine. But there are still things that don't reach across entire arenas. So while I do agree that like it does sort of make a little bit of healing like brainless in that regard, it still applies. You could still absolutely miss a buff, especially if you're a ranged person who wants to get out of everyone else's way.
It's always the range.
And I not to toot my own horn, but I'm pretty good at making sure I'm close enough to get buffs, and it still happens to me. And you know Dancer is the squishiest motherfucker on that field.
Yeah, you don't even have the magic defense.
I do wonder if part of the radius increase for party buffs, as Chad's bringing up, and for stuff, is because now sort of goes into a theme of Endwalker, right, which is raising the stakes, right? Because this has been a thing since ARR, right? And this happens in a lot of fantasy stories. So the shorthand is that we keep raising the stakes, right? First you save the city-states, then you save the continent, then you save like an even bigger continent, and now we're saving the entire known universe from the force of despair itself, right? The stakes have never been higher, and we're fighting bigger bosses as a result, right? We're fighting, like...
Accidentally thematic.
Right. Well, think about it, right? Funscape, right? The biggest thing we fight there now is the giant void flap thing, right? But it's not a scary big thing, right? It's a void flap.
It is.
Right?
You're not wrong. I love it.
But now, like, everything is big, right? We've got a whole bunch of, like, 50%. We've got a whole bunch of, like, the one side of the arena bosses and a bunch of other stuff. So they're as they're escalating the scale and they're making the arenas bigger and they're making the boss bigger, it feels like they're trying to prevent as much of that you're in the opposite corner and you didn't get the buff thing as possible. But it is still possible because math, right? The corner-to-corner example is probably the most common one. Or we're all stacked over here and this person picked the opposite safe spot for some reason. AKA that person is the reason that rescue exists. Over here.
I thought it was just for trolling.
Oh, that too. Yeah, primary.
It's also for black hole. It's also for that.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So the only mechanic I can think of in
that
the entire
loser.
spec.
Get over here.
You're right. Yeah.
Well, that segues us neatly because there's a laser. I was just looking for one.
Actually,
that works.
I actually wanted to bring this up when we were still talking about Pure and Shield. The next healer. When they add the next healer, when we have 5, do you think that Shield Pure thing is just going to go out the window? I'm pretty sure
they should make it a Pure healer and give Astro Nocturnal Sect back.
Agreed.
And
not biased
no
at all.
questions at this time.
But honestly, when I feel like the Pure / Shield thing is just a thing of the now. As soon as there is a new healer, if we ever get another job, because we have a lot of jobs right now, if we ever get another healer, that's just going to go out the window. Like, why do this now? I think that whatever we see them do with these jobs in Dawntrail is going to maybe be an indicator of things to come with it. And I honestly hope that we see Pure and Shield just kind of go away. Give us back our individualities.
I'm a little afraid that we're on the precipice of a Pure Shield with casters in a res, non-res, binary, like, hard enforced line. It's already hard enforced if you care about damage. But when they, just to look at it as an example, added a new caster, will be adding a new caster, it doesn't raise. Well, yeah, the math checked out there.
Sure does.
Going to 5, well, I don't know, and that's the situation that healers are in right now, at least. But I don't know. That's a great question. But the last destabilizing edition was Sage, right? So we got it in Endwalker. All right, first and foremost, healers, career healers, were you excited to see it? Were you scared? Like, what were your first impressions on what it would be like? Just a quick one, because there was a lot of hype for Sage almost immediately, just because it's so cool and pew pew.
So I was mad about Sage because it made Astro be Pure Healer, and I was mad about it. I was convinced that I was going to level it to 90 and never touch it again, and then I brought it into Savage content. And I think Scholar's still my favorite of the shield healers, but I think Sage has its purpose. I say as I cleared Uwu and T on Sage. Sage is definitely... I do still wish Sage was a Pure healer. I wish they had made Astro the shield and they'd made Sage Pure, because Sage has so many movement tools. But my general feel on it is I was not as excited about it as I am now.
Sure.
I thought cardio was going to be better.
Right.
I thought cardio was going to feel like something, and instead cardio feels like it is. I have definitely done entire wall-to-wall pulls in dungeons and forgotten cardia and been like, oh yeah, I've got a button I'm supposed to push at the start of the dungeon. Whoops, my bad.
Well,
right?
and in certain dungeons, cardia makes healing irrelevant. In like lower level dungeons, it makes it completely irrelevant. I have gone through those lower level dungeons and not put a single heal on a tank.
But the fairy used to do that too, so it's kind of
It's true. I mean, there was
I mean, it
this
still does, to be fair.
there was this mindset coming in, and I think this kind of ties into both questions: expectations about next healer as well as Sage. For a long time, there's been an expectation that what are one of the things they could do for healers? They could do a damage dealer that through damage heals, right? And so I think that with Sage, especially when we all saw, oh my gosh, there's lasers and all this other stuff, there was the thought that this might be the healer that falls into that category, where you are, you're that kind of almost punishment healer, right? Where you're healing your party by the damage that you dole out. And of course, we didn't see them fully lean into this with Sage, which I think is maybe one of the things that ended up usurping my expectations the most on it. And that I did think that your damage and stuff like that was going to play a more active role in your healing as Sage than it did. But I will say that I did really enjoy Sage. Like when I got on it and I started figuring it out, I thought that its play style of the healers, at least as they kind of currently were, and with all the changes and everything else that had happened to Astrologian and all that kind of stuff, I was like, oh, this one actually feels kind of distinctive to me. It feels different. It feels engaging in the way that I have to negotiate my thoughts on healing with it. It feels like, you know, at least at that point, it was one of the most kind of tightly worked classes in that, like, I've mentioned Stormblood Astrologian, I'll mention it again. For a long time, and still to this day, that's my favorite class that's ever been in this game in that period of time, because the whole class felt like everything it had worked in tandem. If you really learned how to use it, if you learned how to dovetail certain things together, that optimization process, that understanding, that growth in your skill, the way that it all interplayed was so satisfying. And at least for me, once I started experimenting on Sage, it felt kind of the closest to that, where I was like, oh, I can put together all these little logic steps in my head about Sage, and then it comes together, and then I do my stuff really well if I know how to put that all together. As opposed to some of the other classes where, and granted, I don't scholar much at all, so I can't speak too much to that. But, you know, to me, it felt like it was enjoyable, it was engaging, it was distinctive, and that even though it kind of wasn't what I expected in some ways, I still enjoyed how tightly knit it felt, at least when I was playing it, although I did not take it into endgame, so.
What I really, this is sort of silly, but what I really liked about Sage was that it taught me how to play Scholar. I had a lot of issues initially with learning Scholar. It just did not click in my head. I'd always been a reactive healer. I liked White Mage and actually liked Astro the best, which is, I guess, weird to say since that was partially shield when I was learning it as well. But I did more of the Diurnal Sect when I was playing that one, so it was more of the pure healer. But when I went through and I leveled Sage, for whatever reason, it clicked in a way that Scholar didn't. And when I swapped back over to level Scholar, I was like, oh, this is exactly the same. I understand now. It could have been because it was simplified a bit. They keep simplifying it. And initially when I played Sage, I was like, what? How many buttons do I have? What the crap? But no, Sage actually taught me how to shield heal much better than Scholar ever had.
I'm on board with that too. I still don't particularly like Scholar, even though I'm apparently maining it for Dawntrail.
I told him he had to.
Yeah, I was told that I had to. Yeah, correct. Yes, I was voluntold. That's correct. And I think Sage is a much more, okay, it might just be me, but it's the check mark sound when your shield breaks and you get the Toxicant back, right? Because it sounds like a check mark that you know I'm right. You may not like it, but you know I'm right. And you get the Toxicant stack back. It feels like all of the good brain chemicals for like doing the thing right, in a way that you never really get on Scholar. I also think, and this is kind of interesting, I think that Sage is more rewarding because the shields are smaller. Because if you're doing your job right on something, right, because you see them do something and you take damage, right? And a lot of Scholar shields, if you know you're doing like a crit low spread, and then the warrior does shake it, right? You're like, and the party doesn't take damage, and you're like, cool, I did my job because nothing happened, right? And I did my job so nothing happened. But feels kind of right. And some people do. I just am not one of those people.
No, as a DPS, I like that. As a healer, I want to see what happens. As a DPS, when I get hit with something big and I go, oh, my HP didn't move. Yes.
Yeah. I'm kind of different on that because I prefer Scholar to Sage personally. And so when my party doesn't take damage, I get excited. I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, I did my job.
Totally
But
fair and valid.
Sage, like I said, is so mobile that it's really nice to be able. There's so much setup with Scholar that, it's really rewarding in that your party doesn't take damage. But Sage is like, we can be on the go. We can go, and I can shield you and I can heal you as we're moving. And it just feels a lot better in that regard. So I think they both bring something to the table.
For sure.
Yeah.
I know.
You know what's interesting? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alden.
No, you go ahead. No, go ahead.
All I was going to say is just very quickly that the expectation of Sage being like a damage dealer kind of thing, and then thinking about Alk, how you were talking about its mobility, right? The fact that it has that gap closer, that it has all these other kind of things. I actually think it leans more into that expectation in PvP than it does in PvE gameplay. And it's very much like an offensive and like an area control kind of class in PvP, which is really cool, and it's a very fun, different play style. It takes advantage of some of those things with like the mobility and other things that it has in a way that is really, I think, fun and enjoyable. But it doesn't quite translate exactly the same over to PvE content.
And we've talked about that before, where overall in PvP, all the jobs feel much more representative of what they are supposed to be in comparison to PvE.
Identity is really felt.
Yes.
I was going to ask because I know, Will, you had gone through all the changes. I do remember there was a lot of changes with Sage with MP. Am I correct with that?
Some,
Yeah.
but not enough.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
gonna say.
Oh.
Okay.
Al, you should probably take this.
Sure.
Sage has an MP problem.
Yeah.
The hardest thing when we were going through the Savages was obviously nobody wants to die during a Savage. If anybody goes down, it could be problematic. But it felt particularly punishing on Sage because you lose all your Toxicons, you lose all your Adder's Gall. You wake up with no MP, and if you've just used Lucid, you've got no way of regaining it until an Adder's Gall respawns, and then you have to waste a heal, potentially, just to get MP back to continue DPSing. And Sage's MP problem is one of my biggest struggles with Sage.
Right.
Yeah. And it got to the point where, and I am still unlearning this when I'm co-healing with other people, we were sort of lucky that our static had a res mage in it, and for a while a summoner in it and a res mage. And I play white mage, right? So I get the first res every minute because it's free and instant. Thanks, Thin Air, right? Which is one of the reasons, we'll get there when we talk about white mage. I believe the change to Thin Air was a buff.
Yeah.
We could talk about that later. And so, like, it's not that Sage can't, it's that Sage shouldn't be rezzing. And sort of the push of that work onto the rest of the party, which I don't mind personally, but like from a design perspective, that feels a little weird, right? That it has this MP issue, and that because of that, the 2,400 for a res is a big chunk. It's a very big chunk.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And like you were saying, they tried to adjust it, but it really doesn't seem to do enough. And recovery from death is a thing, right? One could say that, well, you shouldn't be dying. Well, we will be.
Yeah.
And we need tools to come back
Yep.
from that. That's going to happen.
The biggest one was that in 6.1, they shaved 100 off
Yes.
of doses.
Right.
Doses used to be 400, and in 6.1, they changed it to 300.
I would.
And that was like the really the biggest one, I think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because it's just so. You're spamming that.
Right.
I would argue that it is easier than ever for a mage that dies to get their MP back, but that doesn't necessarily make it fun or like satisfying to people who used to buff mana, for example. Like, I miss being able to do that. We have a conversation in chat about red mages being able to just be like, here you go, you're fine now, it's good.
So cool.
Yeah. And I feel like those are the things that they've taken off of jobs that were so satisfying to do in the past that really need to come back, maybe at
Sure.
a lower level, because like if we gave original refresh back, what was it called then? It was the Mana song, Mana something, whatever the
yeah.
the Bard one is now. Either way,
Mage
eventually
Ballad.
refresh that they took. Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, if they gave that back to us how it originally was, it would be so overpowered. But getting it back at a lower level, I think would be really satisfying to not only the people who want the mana, but the people who got to do the buffing in the first place.
I also think
agree.
it's also kind of interesting. Much like cast bars are a healer only mechanic, it feels like for the purposes of most fights,
Mhm.
MP is a healer only mechanic,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
right? Because Black Mage doesn't care.
Nope.
Black Mage's MP is a second job gauge,
Yeah.
Yep.
right? Red Mage probably doesn't care unless they're rezzing so many people that
Yeah.
you're like the only time they're going to res that many people is when you're in normal content, so your MP doesn't matter because the fight
Right.
lasts as long as it needs to. Summoner doesn't really either, right? So again, it's a thing, and I think
Dark Knight might if you do a bad
Yeah,
job.
Dark Knight's the only one.
that's yeah,
But they're not rezzing.
right.
Yeah.
They're not rezzing, and it's also a job gauge thing, right?
Yeah,
it also
for
feels like a
sure.
job gauge there.
Mhm.
I just think the other really weird thing is how well mechanics that are likely to get you killed line up with your lucid windows,
Yes.
which is a really weird thing, right? Because the assumption is for all the healers that you're slapping lucid more or less on cooldown,
Mm-hmm.
right? To go MP positive or to maintain as you're having to do anything other than spam your damage spells.
Unless you're Astro.
Unless you're Astro, but Astro gets to be good at one thing. Astro gets to be good at one thing.
One thing, and that's
They've
MP
got one-
management.
Right. No, they've got it. It's theirs. I'll freely grant it. Astro is good at that one thing. And the number of times where we'd be doing something and Alk would just, it'd be, fuck. And then we'd be like, you just popped lucid, then immediately died, didn't you? Yep. All right. Everybody hit the wall. Right? 'Cause,
Or I would be like, oops, I've been DPSing too much. Will, let me get the next heal. I need MP.
Right.
Yeah.
Rerouting on the fly. Or I after seeing Alk do Sage in Savage content, I run it for pretty much all my roulettes now. Because healers are my comfy class. I'm a day 1, minute 1, 2 present healer main. I started as a conjurer in Gridania, and I've never changed it really. Like I've got everything at 90 and like all that, but I'm a healer main at heart. And so I have super ethers on my bar outside of
Yes.
Deep Dungeon because the volume of because the volume of rezzing that you have to do in some roulettes, particularly with Xbox Sprouts, particularly with random stuff, right? Like the eye level cap on final day or like whatever.
Oh, yes.
Right. It is now very possible if your co-healer is one of the new people to just run out of MP. Right? You're using an item which is not a damage pot in a roulette. That's okay. All right. Okay. Here we go.
I ran World of Darkness the other day on a healer to help a buddy get gear, just like gear farm. And I was in there with another healer who was actually healing and paying attention and doing stuff. And there were so many people dying, just so many people dying. And I just like offhandedly typed in there, man, I really miss, you just said it, the one that takes away MP cost of a spell.
Thin air.
There you
Thin
go.
Air, yeah.
I really miss Thin Air. And the other healer was like, oh, tell me about it. Yeah. But I'm really enjoying having someone else heal. And I'm like, yes, you're here healing. I'm here healing. We're actually doing the thing.
We're doing it together.
I most frequently swap comms. At least I'm pretty sure I'm swapping comms with my co-healer in 8-person duties.
For me, it 100% depends on if they do the thing. If they're like, you got it, right? Yeah, see you later. Here's a bunch of damage. You got that raise, right? Even though you just got the last 2? Yeah, you're cool. Okay, bye.
Yeah.
No come for you.
It is
Yeah,
an
no.
it's an interesting point because I mean, this whole kind of discussion about MP really only being something that is largely relevant to healers is really true. And yet even in healing, it's one of those things where unless something has gone really wrong or you've died and your mana pool is punished as a result, or you're having to do an excessive amount of rezzing amidst other healing pressures, MP or your sage, MP isn't necessarily something that. So sorry, Alex. Sorry. It isn't necessarily something that anymore for the vast majority of healing is a hugely conscious thought. I mean, I can think back to those fun Skaith runs on White Mage in the time of Heavensward, where MP was in that same position for White Mage, where it was like, holy cow, I was having to hit. Yeah, like I was having to hit it on cooldown constantly, like for any kind of amount of MP back, bringing in the potions or anything else that you could.
You had
just
to use ethers in Savage then.
Yeah, like having people pass you MP. In certain ways, I understand why they have just towards like not making that something that's super restrictive, except in like very certain cases. But it's kind of one of those examples in 14 where there's an opportunity for, cooperative stuff or party or buffs, right? That then they were kind of just like, oh, well, people kind of find this to be a hindrance. So we're just going to negate it and negate it and negate it until maybe it gets to the point where we just remove it as a resource entirely, which not that I think they're going to remove MP per se, but right. We saw this with things like TP and stuff, where I can't help but kind of hope that they may be looking ahead to future content, maybe realize that there's an opportunity there, right? Like you can be a little bit more punishing on some of those resources if you give other classes something to help with it, right? So we return things like that to Bard, or rather than reses just being the only functionality support-wise for casters, we could expand it out into something like a refresh, or, we saw with Scholar this expansion, things like Expedient. Thank you. Expedience. Where now we're seeing movement enhancing things being a buff, as opposed to just having, we've narrowed down to this idea that only pure damage up is a buff that is relevant. Yeah. But like, that's only because we've kind of created the situation in which it's only relevant. So if they kind of lean more into opening those things up, and yes, maybe that puts a little pressure in certain areas, but I think it also gives you an opportunity too.
We are sharing a brain cell right now because I was having the exact same thought. Like, I was like, I just hope that MP does not go the way of TP. It is very, very quickly becoming not useful to most of the classes in a way that TP did, even more than TP did, actually.
Oh, yes.
And they got rid of TP. So
I think MP as like a whole, sorry, there's a car going by.
Okay.
MP as a whole has been around for like all Final Fantasy games. I don't think MP is going anywhere. I think they might just try to find new ways to work with it.
I think that goes to the fight design, right? So this is not what this is about, so I'm going to shorthand this. The burden of knowledge for a new player entering Savage for the first time is higher and higher and higher, right? Because if you think about P2 or 3 versus E2 or 3, or O2 or 3, or A2 or 3, right? Now, with the current kit, right, not as it was back in the day, but as they are coming in now, right, the difficulty is getting higher and higher and higher, and the normals are getting harder and harder, and the EXs are getting harder and harder, too.
I fundamentally disagree with that.
Ooh, we can fight about it later. Okay. I want to do this.
Yeah, make your point.
Okay, yeah. They are running out of axes to make things harder in more interesting ways. So the ways you can make things harder, really bigger numbers, more precision, right? You've got tiny itty bitty triangles in Endsinger EX, right? Like the very small safe spots, right? Precision positioning for things like one plat in P10, right? You have not a lot of pixels to stand in for one plat strat. Or you can find something else to like make it more difficult. And any buff right now is just helping with the damage, because the faster we kill the boss, the less we have to heal, the fewer mechanics we have to see, the better it is. but I do think there is a lot of space for other buffs that do other things, like Speedy Pete's, like Dancer getting improv, right?
Right.
Dancer's improv now is really good for, especially when it's the boss leaves and then comes back, like transitional mechanics. Right? I'm thinking of
Almost never happens anymore.
Yeah.
Superhero Landing in Barb. That's the one I'm thinking of. But but that's like its own thing. And it was super useful there because I don't know how many of you remember, but Barb at launch, Barb normal, unmitigated phase changed, flattened min eye level casters.
Yeah.
Murdered.
Barb?
Just dead.
Like,
Yep.
Barb, no joke, is probably my favorite fight outside of, like, Savage stuff of the entirety of Endwalker. And it was really fun as a healer because of how hectic it was and how it changed up some of the pacing of the healing allocation, right? Because you had a lot of those phases where it was kind of like bullet hell style almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It changed up some of the pacing of healing in an interesting way.
Yeah, and I mean, I saw in chat a while back, people were talking about how the stakes for healing normal content need to be increased. And I think Endwalker started to do that in normal content with things like Barb or even P10 normal, because like I still see group struggle in P10 normal. You know, things start to go south and then you get to Harrowing Hell and it's like, oh no, half the party's gone now because there wasn't enough healing before it. And I think I'm hoping in Dawntrail that we kind of start to see more of that carry through and that normal content starts to get harder to match the level that we're at.
Do you think balancing that is just a matter of balancing that content or a matter of balancing the job? Because I feel like if they change the job up any, then it would make dungeons annoying.
I think it would have to be it would have to be both.
Right? No part of this system exists in a vacuum, right? It's all a holistic thing that makes up the entirety of the experience, right? So everything's got to change. Otherwise, you get things like when we did that Uwu day, right? I was one of the rookies that went in, and we were talking about how the difference in potency buffs that different jobs have gotten over the X-Pack has made different jobs really good at Uwu because they've gotten potency buffs that have trickled back to 70 and make them better at Uwu than they were at launch, as an example.
Yep, Summoner's better at any other level than 90 almost. Almost.
Yeah.
For example, right? Just in throughput, right? Not in feel, usually. Summoner.
Yeah.
It is funny how
But yeah.
much massive damage Dancer does when it like comes
Oh,
into
sure.
existence, and then when you get towards the end, it's like, oh no, you're the baby at the bottom.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Tech step is like chunky, and then it's not.
Averaged over.
It
time.
is for a second and a half, and then see you in 2 minutes.
True.
Yeah.
The moment of glory.
Okay, Ninja.
Yes. Okay, ninja.
But are you, in fact, a hoodie ninja?
Yes, every day.
Good. I'm glad.
As we
Every day.
continue to talk about Sage and MP and just healer in general, so we talked about Pure Shield. We talked about how maybe it didn't hit the mark. Does it functionally feel different? Sage Scholar, moment to moment, Dungeon, Savage Criterion, if you've done it, that not talking about raiding, talking about small content, right? We've talked already about Cardia and kind of invalidating heals, lower level. Does it functionally feel any different? Would you want to bring one over the other? Like, for expediency, for comfort? I mean, comfort is kind of personal, but is there a problem with Sage and Scholar in that content? It's
a really
okay to
good
say
question. I feel like for me, a lot of it comes down to less about the healing, because I know the Sage toolkit and I know the Scholar toolkit pretty well. I can do both successfully.
no. Right.
I think for me, a lot of it comes down to the actual content itself. And do I have the time for Scholar setup, or do I need more reactive with Sage? And I had a conversation. I personally haven't done the Criterion Savage, but I was talking to friends earlier who did, and they said that Sage is by far superior in Criterion Savage.
That's
Reasons,
what I've heard, yeah.
all kinds of reasons, but they said that Scholar feels really punishing. I hear Criterion Savage in general is really punishing.
Oh, yes.
But Scholar in particular, in comparison to Sage, is, and And I think I do kind of feel it even in some of those leveling dungeons, right? Like Holminster Switch, for example.
Oh, yes.
Like we'll go back to Shadowbringers. I've done it both on Sage and Scholar successfully. They're both fine. They're both doable. But I feel like Scholar feels better with things like XCOG and with the Fairy Tether and you know, all kinds of stuff. So I think it just kind of depends for me.
I mean,
go ahead.
I was going to say, of all of the healers, if I know I'm going to run a dungeon, and I'll be totally fair, I don't generally run dungeons. I don't have the attention span for them right now. I'll run 8s because trash packs annoy me to no end right now. And that's just where I'm at with the game, and that's not a problem with them. It's where I'm at. I will always run Sage. Just because I feel like my clear times are with a random group of people is faster, right? I also, if I don't remember a particular dungeon, I have an on cooldown use of "you're my legs right now. I'm in the wrong spot. Now I'm not. Now I'm in the right spot," which is incredibly powerful. And the trash pack rotation isn't holy spam. Holy's great. Don't get me wrong. I love holy. Right, I'm still all about like I'm gonna stun everything for 10 billion years. It's great, it's fine. It's also a little boring to just be doing that versus managing shields and toxicant stacks and phlegma and all of that stuff. So, at least for me, that's where I'm at with it.
Right. You know, because for me, having not healed at all, I can feel the difference between a Sage and Scholar in kind of later dungeons. I also have not done Savage Criterion because that does not sound like fun to me, especially because I'm a summoner. Cool, take away the one thing that you tax me for. That's fine. No, I don't want to lose the race without damage. But I've also seen a little bit of a difference in Deep Dungeon. I know, Alchemy, you were talking about, you had talked to people. Sage solo. It seems like it would be great, right? Is it? Is it one of the healers that you just kind of, that's the one that you're going to do first?
For solo Deep Dungeon?
Yeah, solo Deep Dungeon.
So I have done solo Deep Dungeon on White Mage and Sage both.
Okay.
I started to take Scholar into solo Deep Dungeon and I hated it.
Right.
I've also tried to take Astro into solo Deep Dungeon and hated that despite me loving Astro. Sage and White Mage definitely feel the most comfy in those spaces. I think they excel, especially with all their movement tools and with like White Mage having Dia doing damage, you can technically kite stuff.
I forget that Astro doesn't have that.
Yeah, Astro doesn't, and Sage is an active dot, technically.
Yeah, I always forget that.
White Mage is the only one that does that. That does damage on impact, which I think we should change that, but that's a personal opinion.
No,
Right.
We also
No, it's fair.
we also don't have any other way to do damage on the move.
Yes.
Scholar, all three of the others.
That is true.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
So,
true.
Unless you have a flower.
Right. Well, yeah, and we'll get to that when we talk about White Mage, but
Soon.
you shouldn't, but you probably do.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go on.
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
I feel like Sage feels extra comfy in Deep Dungeon solo. And from what I've gathered from the other Deep Dungeon people I'd talked to, Aurora Moon and Angelus and a couple others about it, and they all said basically the same thing. That Sage, especially on release, because a lot of them went and immediately did Reaper in Deep Dungeon and Sage in Deep Dungeon. Like that was the first thing. They hit the ground running and they went and did it. And so many of them did it on Sage so fast. Like it was, and they were like, oh, that was easy. That was comfy. And I'm like, what? Like, okay. But I think Encardia helps with that too.
I was gonna say, it turns out cardioing yourself is silly strong.
Yeah.
It's like it's the one time where it hit what you thought it was going to be, right?
Well,
it's like,
and-
when it's on yourself.
You double dip on strength.
Right.
Right. Cardia lets you double dip on strength palms, which is silly.
It's insane.
Yeah. Right. Like it's just silly.
I learned some fun information from someone who did the math that, fun fact, Astro's damage is so bad that Astro with strength still does, which is a 30% damage up, by the way, does less damage than Conjurer at level 60 without a strength.
Oh, no.
That's icky.
Aurora
not fair.
said that their 150 solo boss run on Astro took about 25 minutes, and Conjurer, not White Mage, Conjurer took 18.
Ooh.
Right.
So there's a bit of an imbalance there, in my opinion.
Just a little
But
bit.
I mean,
yeah.
Anyway, how
I
come
guess-
your dance partner gets to work on yourself, Sage?
Oh yeah, I know,
Oh,
right?
sure.
I guess it's one of those things where, yeah, the supposed trade-off would be that Astrologian has the party damage buff utility, right? But again, it goes to show. I mean, this is true of any MMO. It's a very difficult one to balance across a ton of different game modes. Two, when those game modes have unique things like Deep Dungeon does, right? Where if you try to go in solo on that, your damage, in addition to your own survivability and other things, are also important. But it does point out a greater kind of problem as well within, some of the decision making of why you do or don't bring Astrologian into stuff, or how it just feels on its own, kind of compared to others, and in what kind of content. Because yeah, it's definitely, like was said earlier, a lot of work for less of that, just kind of freely given, kind of stuff.
Right.
But does it balance it out with all the other stuff that it does in certain types of content? Perhaps, but it isn't applicable to everything, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's been true, right? I'm thinking Bozia again. I went into Bozia and entered a fever dream state and came out with Guardian Angel and a absolute love for the entire zone.
Right.
And I've tried to play all the healers, and it feels pretty clear that most of the really good upper end healer toolkit in Bozia was designed for White Mage, and everyone else just kind of benefited to some extent from it, right? So they've been pretty spiky on side content design and which healers they expect to do well.
I feel like that's really, really apparent in the 24-mans too. So you pop those like buff whatever's on. I forget even what they're called at this time. I want to say Puffin. That's a Pokemon thing. I don't know. You give yourself those like orb buffs, and you go in on White Mage. You are no longer a healer. You are a DPS now.
Oh yeah,
Very
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you can, and the truly terrifying part is you can do both.
Yeah,
There's a hybrid build. It's a deep ordained chain spell that both makes you do more damage and makes all of your spells instant cast and gives you more MP, which is how I got the Guardian Angel title, because you go into stuff and you just start picking people up. Like you pop chain spell and it's 20 seconds of every time my GCD spins, someone is getting up off the floor.
To answer the question, it's lost actions in Bozia.
Lost action.
There,
Lost actions.
there you
There it
go.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot about Scholar and other things. Is there anything else about the current Scholar? A lot about Sage. Is there anything else about current Sage that we haven't really talked about in any niche content? I mean, we talked about MP, and I think that was very important because that is not an apparent issue for a lot of people. If that's the case, then what the heck do they get in Dawntrail? Right? Like, okay, we can try and solve the MP issue. What would help kind of finalize its kit? Does it need that? Is it all right where it is, and it just kind of needs some extra cool stuff?
What if they put that on Cardia? What if it becomes something like when the tank crits, you get MP or something?
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
I would
Cool.
take
Interesting.
that. I know a lot of people
Like
are
a spring.
hoping that Sage gets a recitation like how a scholar does, but I
Sure.
kind of don't want that.
Too samey.
It would really homogenize it to have some kind of recitation or some kind of guaranteed crit and a spread.
Would you, on that note, would you accept an out of combat one to prevent crit fishing but pre-pull? Because that's the only reason I would want one on Sage.
Sure.
I wouldn't
Or do
say
you
no
think-
to it.
Okay.
Sage has definitely kind of made itself very clear that it is a mitigation healer rather than like a thick shield healer. So I think I'm just kind of expecting more mitigation from them. Like how Holos does an extra 10%. Panheima's got the multi-hit thing. And they actually have Haima too, which is the single target multi-hit. So it's like, okay, maybe one single target crit shield maybe, but
Mhm.
I don't know that I want the same kind of like recitation adlo spread that Scholar
Right.
has.
Yeah, if they could pick a target, maybe.
Hmm.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting because I haven't seen a whole lot of Sage talk of what needs to happen in Dawntrail. There's not a lot of what needs to happen. What would be nice, but not what is necessary. So I mean, I'm at a loss because I don't heal, and even in the community, there's not a lot other than the recitation and spread, which I'm with you. I don't think that we should really be diluting Scholar in that way. I mean, it's the last thing it has left. Come on. It's not, but
I will say, one, as long as we're
Mhm.
wish listing, I want
Yeah,
another
absolutely.
Eucrasian action.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
That
that'd be
that
fun.
that is like part of their thing, is like switching
Mhm.
between these modes. Is I would like another Eucrasian action, right? And
Yeah.
they might not for
Absolutely.
the same reason that Dark Arts doesn't weave anymore, and why they've got certain limits on speed for input lag and stuff. But I think that the Eucrasian system is really neat,
Yeah.
and I think I would really like something. I'm not saying Eucrasian phlegma. I'm not saying like
No, Eucrasian phlegma puts a dot on all of the
my
AoE
gosh.
targets, just
Right,
like
well-
Bane used to do.
right, but
Perfect.
there's some room for that. I think
Yeah.
that would probably be.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's all I would be looking for. Like, I think that Sage inherently has good kind of little systems
Mhm.
built into it. I mean, like we talked about, maybe Cardia is a little underwhelming in what it
Mhm.
offers in regards to that. Maybe the expectation was that you would get more of a, coming into Endwalker, you would get more of like a damage dealt heal kind of thing going on. I think that all of the kind of structure and systems in Sage are pretty sound, and maybe just expanding off of that, like talking about, like, Eucrasia are talking about, something with the Cardia effect, or having a little bit more of an interplay off of some of those mechanics that are a part of it, some of the adjustments with MP, or something where, again, maybe we're giving some other classes something to help account for that and adjusting MP for other healers, or I think that Sage, for me personally, out of all of the healers, feels like at the very least its kit and concept are the most tightly kind of knitted right now, and I think that it's very well kind of paced, where I don't feel as though a bunch of stuff in its kit feels super redundant. I don't feel like, it's like, oh, this is just pretty much the exact same thing but relabeled 5 times in the kit or something. Like, to me it just feels like it's well knit together, and really the most I'd want to see them do is just kind of expand a bit off of some of those concepts and just kind of evolve them a little bit more, as opposed to, like, dump all of this, put this in, revert this back to what it was, like, I think
Yeah.
for me it feels like it is a strong concept as it is right now. And maybe they bring in a little bit of influence from some of those PvP things like we talked about, like the limit break effect that they have in PvP is very cool, where you put down that area that is defensive to your allies and that is offensive to enemies that enter it. Like, that's a super
So
cool
good.
idea.
That is
It's
I
so
know.
good.
Like, I love it, and it is so punishing in many ways when you're in a PvP setting, right? Especially when you're vying over a control point, and then that goes down, and everybody's like, oh, "Come on!" like, trying
Get
to
the
fight
hell
over
in
it.
there.
But I think you could still translate some of that concept into stuff like the in PvE. And it could be very interesting, especially if they wanted to design some fights where we maybe got to see some interesting ad phases or stuff like that, where having a Sage might help you manage those kinds of things on a field. Or, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities for it, right? So I think that they could do a lot of interesting things with that. But otherwise, I feel like Sage is a pretty solid concept as it is.
I agree.
Saying bring back Shadow Flare. That's what I'm hearing. Shadow Flare.
I saw
Yeah.
it a couple times in chat.
Yes.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yes. Well, I think that's good for Sage right now. So I put these in order of added to the game. So I mean, comes first, White Mage.
Mm,
White Mage.
I'm
You
not
ready?
even that to wilt.
Yes.
White Mage. So
glare turret time. Yes.
Yes.
Obviously.
So on the way to Endwalker, we saw a lot of changes. We were like, what the heck is that bell thing? What is this? How is this going to work? What are the changes that really stood out to you? Being a White Mage.
The 3 big ones:
Mm-hmm.
Lit Bell,
Sure.
Asylum bigger,
Mm-hmm.
Asylum just very nice. And then the speed, the realignment of Assai's and Lily's,
Mhm.
right? Because the Lily change is actually absolutely flippin' massive. I think
Right.
it
Yeah.
for a whole bunch of reasons. So Lily went from 30 to 20 seconds per charge. Unlike Sage, who gets to start with all of their Adder Skull stacks
Mhm.
for very good
Yay.
reasons. By the way, I'm not complaining about that.
Yeah.
We don't start with Lilies. And the change means that instead of holding a Blood Lily for 30 seconds to try and get it in under buff window, you're yeeting one during 1 minute, which means it's not going to do very much. And you do get another one up for 2 minutes, which is a massive difference in that. And it just means that we have more mobile free healing, which helps with the MP problems. And Assai's is just great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same. I think all the changes played to White Mage's benefit, largely. I mean, even the Medica 3 change, you know what I mean?
Right.
Not that Medica 3, I think, holds as much prominence as it used to because we
Medica
have so
3?
many other healing. Am I saying Medica 3?
Cure 3.
Cure 3,
Cure
excuse
3,
me. Thank
yeah.
you, sorry.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
I was like, how do I have? Am I missing a button?
No, I just skipped. Cure 3, you know, it used to be that kind of thing where it's like, oh, it's so restrictive because it's the biggest AoE heal you have in your kit and all this stuff. And it's like, of course, now we have a lot more flexibility on White Mage. I mean, things like the Lilies allow for much more on-demand, instantaneous, you know, casting, and obviously lead to things like the damage that we can deal out with the Lilies. And that changed the Lily pacing, like you were pointing out, Will, was really great and beneficial in those regards. So it doesn't feel so awkward within the confines of the 2-minute structure.
Right.
And I mean, yeah, the size changes. There's no problems with mana anymore. It's between a size, between the Lilies, I mean, I think it used to be more so that with the exception of a size, right? That White Mage had strong heals, but it was much more cast dependent in the history of games, right? Like we had less things prior to Lilies and all these other systems that were put in place that were instantaneous, on demand, fast, you know, run around the arena on the fly kind of heals. So they put things in the kit to balance that. Do I want to say that right now White Mage is too strong? No, of course not. Buff it forever. Give me your dance partner. Let me be a DPS. I don't know you. Don't nerf it. Don't touch it. No, but I mean, the thing is that I think that a lot of the weaknesses in White Mage over the years, or weird structural stuff, like when they first decided to foist in the Lily system and it made no sense and nothing worked right and it was weird. Like, most of that stuff has just been eradicated. Most of the weaknesses of the class have been eradicated. So it is the most straightforward. It is incredibly powerful. My biggest complaint is that sometimes in most fights, I don't even feel like I need to use all my heals because I just have so many of them. I'm tripping over them. And the DPS, the rotation, if you will, is pretty boring.
Slidecast, right? You
right?
slidecast. That's how I knew I was comfy with a fight. Was I went from standing in place and then moving to preemptively slide casting everywhere. Right?
Yeah.
That's how I knew I was.
Much.
Yeah, right. Which it's not really interesting damage. It's just helpful.
And yeah, things like Liturgy of the Bell. Other than the name, which originally at Media Tour was called Lily Bell, and everyone still calls it that to this day.
To this day.
And liturgy, right? Like, other than the name, I mean, it's added an extra thing into the kit. I mean, all of this to say with White Mage, I mean, I think it's in an incredibly good place. It's solid and satisfying, and if anything, it's overqualified for most of the requirements and content that are asked of it of healing.
Like in chat, they're asking what's the best healer to start with, and I was even gonna say it's White Mage.
It's White Mage.
Is
It's White
like
Mage.
Rook said, it's the most straightforward. It is the easiest one to pick up, play, and make sure you don't murder people on.
It's also the only one you can start at level 1.
Exactly.
Also
Right?
true.
Because everything else you start at least 30. Right?
Yeah.
And so getting into building it into that. Right.
If we're saying at least 30, technically it's Conjurer, but yes, basically yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, but hearing all this, right? Like,
So if you're just to put that in there, if you're looking for White Mage at level 1, that's not what you're looking for. Look for Conjurer, pick that up, and level that.
And you're looking for Stillglade Fane in Gridania.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's it occurs to me that over the years of this game, I didn't really think about how weird healers were when it comes to starting one. And that's something that I
Yeah.
never thought about.
I didn't either.
Right, because
Yeah.
I've always had it leveled, since I played in 2.0. But I'm hearing that white mages are just the best healers. Like, just pure
Not
healers.
the
I had this question.
The best. The most straightforward and
Debatable.
like
Straightforward.
maybe bang for
Right.
your buck.
Okay.
type
I
deal.
mean, yeah, I would say that they don't have a lot of weaknesses per
Mhm.
se, and that they are the most straightforward and give you the most for the most straightforward effort. I mean, again, it's not like anything is so wildly out of balance. If anything, honestly though, I do think they could cut back on some of the stuff with White
Sure.
Mage, and it would still be fine, and it would probably give an opportunity for other healers to niche
Right.
into certain
Yeah.
areas. And I think that's something too, even with a lot of the healers, at various points in the game, or even now, where sometimes it's okay if a class is not that it has to be super hyper niche, but like
Mhm.
it's okay if it is not a jack of all trades. It's okay if it kind of does a thing and you really build around that and it does that really well. And I think right now we're in an incredibly good spot for White Mage. It's strong, it's solid. You can bring it into almost any group, and it's not, I mean, people are just gonna be like, yeah, sure, fine, bring in the White Mage. It's not like there's any weird hangups with it or anything like that. But I mean, it could almost, it's generalized in a sense, and you could, I think, cut back on stuff or tailor them in a more
Sure.
specific direction, and it would still be fine, and other healers would work well too. So
I
Yeah,
really like how you said, so White Mage is the best, and every single
Yep.
one of us was like, no, that's not what we're saying. White Mage is the
Yeah,
one
bit on
where
purpose, maybe.
if somebody needs a healer in any kind of content and I am sleepy and was about to go to bed but decide to help them, White Mage is the one that I take in.
Which is
That's
so
fair.
funny because I feel like that's completely to the point, because I can sleep mage on scholar or sage easier than I can on white mage.
That's fair.
And I started the game as a conjurer. I started and I hated it so much that I swapped to ninja, and I didn't look back until I had leveled my ninja to 80 and was like, what am I gonna do now? Well, I guess I've got this white mage at level 42 and I leveled it then, and then I discovered scholar.
Mhm.
I really
And then I
like,
discovered Astro, and I was
Yeah.
like, there's so many things I can do
Right.
with all of these, and I just left White Mage alone. And then Will came along, and I was like, well, I don't need the White Mage now. I've got one.
I really
Yeah.
like the way that we do have jobs that click differently with different brains, right? Everybody's got like their own job that
Mhm.
clicks with their brain in a way that's like, I am asleep, I'm hitting the buttons correctly, no one is dead, I have done the correct damage, I have all of the hate. Guess what? I actually have been asleep for the past 2 minutes.
I've literally run dungeons blindfolded as a ninja and not messed up my rotation.
Yeah.
That's ninja for me.
Yeah.
I
know-
do. I do think there is one weakness of white mages, which is lack of OGCDs. I do want to bring that up. A common misconception among people who do not heal, and I don't know if you've run into this, Rook or Alk, is that some people think think lilies are OGCD. They are not. They are not. They are instant cast. They are not OGCD. And so we've got Confession, which is great. 2 jars of Divine Benison, Tetra, Aquaveil, and then 2 ground placements. And I hesitate to call ground placements an
Yeah.
OGCD at this
Yeah.
point.
They
Like
do
they're
fast.
not. They're used differently, right?
Yes.
Plus assays, right? So and those tools have, relatively speaking, long cooldowns, right? With the exception of Benison, which is sort of like I have shielded you. Behold, I did my part.
Mhm.
And everyone's like, but did you? And you're like, yes, look, there's a buff on your status bar. I'm helping.
It's gone now.
And they're like-
Tuxedo mask.
Right. And they're like,
Issue, right?
no, it's not. And you're like, I tried. Give me some credit here. Right. And that, and like, so we've got a lot of long cooldown stuff. It doesn't feel like we've got the same, I don't know, array of OGCDs available, which is fine. I'm not complaining about that. I just do want to point out that we're like very GCD tied, which is one of the reasons that
So
there needs to be so much slide casting.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
Um,
And
I think
maybe the
that's-
only
Mhm.
oh, I was gonna say the only thing that I feel like might be a little redundant in our kit when you bring this up with the divine benisons and is it Aquavale?
Yeah.
Aquavale is the other one? Right,
Aqua
okay.
Veil is the 10% on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny to me because honestly, I think White Mage doesn't even need either of those. And again, we'd still do fine. But it felt like one of those things where they were like, "Oh, well, everybody else has like at least a shield, and you've got heal over time and stuff, but we'll give you a couple." And you kind of customarily throw them on here or there to help reduce some incoming damage
Or
or
it's the
whatever it is,
butterscotch
right?
candy from a grandparent.
They're
Yeah,
nice for
it-
dungeons, especially
they're
with
nice. They have
people
their-
with tanks who are maybe not as skilled.
Yeah,
Because you're like, oh, you just got your butt hit, and I am running. Here is a shield.
Yeah, or if you are like, you're in content where like the tank busters are just brutal or and then they give you a tiny bit more wiggle room to deal with stuff. But it is one of those little weird kind of things in the class where it doesn't maybe fit as much as the other stuff. And I felt like Aquavale to me was just, it's kind of a strange one. It's fine. It's fine, but it's so short. It's even shorter than, I'll put on my little my benison on one of the people, like one of my tanks, and then I'll like wait until the last possible second and be like, oh, who's Aquavale? And then I'll just toss it, I'll like drop it on them because it's so short. It's something where I don't even know if we needed it. Like the two charges, otherwise were fine with the benisons, and I think you could have even just given a third and it would have been about the same. But it's fine. It's something else that we have in the kit. It's not like a huge issue. So
We are also the class that had fluid aura.
I was gonna
on
say,
our
what
bar
about fluid
until the end of
aura?
Shadowbringers?
Yeah.
So, right, like we're
Yeah.
no strangers to having weird superfluous skills. For those of you joining us at Endwalker, was it fluid aura was a bind?
Mhm.
That thing that we do so often in everything that's not overworld
It was
content.
a knockback.
a knockback and a bind originally. Honestly, I wish we still I wish that they had given more of a specific use
I
for
missed
it.
that one.
I know. Well, because there used to be this thing very early in the game where in incredibly low level dungeons when pulling was more irregular, when we had the stance dancing
dance.
and everything else. There used to be this wombo combo that you would do where you would knock back an enemy if like your tank had accidentally pulled too many or aggro was having problem or it came over to you. You would knock them back and then you could bind them / sleep them. And it was actually very cool. Like I remember when I discovered it and I was like, this is so cool. I love that you can like incapacitate an enemy strategically and like let your tank deal with whatever else, then stagger in this next enemy. And it was a little strategic touch that was really fun. The thing is that the design of the game just didn't call for it at any point from then on. Even in some of the MDI casting that I did recently for Blizzard, right? When you're watching things like the Mythic Plus speedruns, it's so cool because the way that they are strategizing pulls in that kind of content, how many mobs they're bringing in, exactly what those mobs do. We need to sleep this one. We need to stun that one. This enemy type, you have to immediately interrupt that. This, or the whole run wipes and you're out the time for it, right? And that's not something that we have.
Our trash is a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah. So
It
like,
doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, if we had that in any regards, be it in raid wings or be it in something like even now we have the Criterion and Savage stuff or other things, there would still be a reason to have stuff like those CC specific abilities or combos. That would be so cool. And I keep hoping that like maybe it'll see a comeback someday, but it'll never will, and it doesn't need to if they're not going to design anything for it.
Cross your fingers. We'll get it as a field op specific action at 90. It'll be great,
Maybe,
right? Because sleep, by the way, if you're in field ops and you're not using sleep, probably should be using sleep. Sleep is absolutely goated in field ops.
Has to be on your boat.
Absolutely, 100%. I do think that the I like that we don't shield. I like not having shields as White Mage. I like having that weakness because it establishes a pretty clear line in a way that really helps delineate roles for like random co-healers, right? So like
Mhm.
when I go into a dungeon as a sage or into any kind of co-healer situation as a sage, I have to tell scholars that they are still in charge of shielding. I will pure heal under their shields
Mm.
because I know that they're going to put on a thicker shield than I will, and that my
Mhm.
shields will mess up theirs, right? So I have to do that, and there's no question about that when I'm running white mage, right?
Mhm.
I can't do that. That's your job. As long as they don't die, I got it, right? I
Yeah.
can put everyone to full health as long as they don't die. So that feels like a strength in that the class has a weakness, but it delineates the boundaries of what the class is for.
Yeah,
Which I really like.
In DSR, our sage and our white mage have this meme about their MIT plan for the final phase because it's just wings. And meanwhile, Revan's pumping out like AoE shields, hollows, whatever else he's got going on. He's like, shield, 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 mitt, mitt. And the white mage is like, that's all you get.
I'm pretty.
Yeah.
Look how pretty.
So pretty.
That leads directly into the next thing. We've talked about white mage. I think we can probably infer solo and kind of them alone healing. But are they a good co-healer? So I asked this question
If
in
they're
this
healing.
vein. Right. I asked the question in this vein because we talked a little bit about the overheal for lilies, right? Do they have too much healing to really help with the stuff that really needs to help? Or is it a perfect synergy between shield and pure if there's white mage? Is there any resentment that white mage just does their thing, right? Like I've just heard it a lot where it's like, yep, I'm just overhealing, just straight up overhealing. That's just what I'm doing.
I mean,
it's not useful.
you end up. I want to point out that it's impossible to not overheal if you're
Right,
doing your
of course.
rotation correctly, right? So, like,
course.
that's a big part of it. Lily Bell is more healing than anything except baby harrowing hell needs,
Literally.
right? And harrowing hell, depending on your mid plan, that's a maybe. It
Mhm.
might be too much healing for harrowing hell. If you've got like a really solid mid plan and everyone knows what they're doing and everyone's in right gear and in food and everything else. And Assize is just pumping out overhealing on cooldown,
Yeah,
right? Because you're throwing it
always.
for damage, not for healing, right? So though, and Asylum is always overhealing because it is
Mhm.
also overkill. Because Asylum is, hold on, I got the job guide up. I don't even remember my potencies. I don't use them.
Well,
Astro has the same problem though too with
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
star.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
Asylum is 100 for 24 seconds and 10% additional healing. So it's really 110 for 24 seconds if
Mhm.
they're inside of it, and now it's huge, right? So, and if you throw Assize inside of it, now that's getting buffed too. So you just kind of sneeze and the party's full health,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I feel like, so in our raid we've been doing a scholar white mage,
Mhm.
right? And our party has said multiple times, the healing is great. The healing is not a problem. Like in the sense that, like when we're puzzling through a mechanic or deaths or stuff like that, we'll have that moment where we're evaluating, is it because right now we were short on the amount of healing we needed to recoup? Did we not have the shields out proactively enough? And a lot of times that is not at all the case. Occasionally, I mean, yes, we're not infallible. We mess up, or it's like, yeah, I did not hit the thing I was supposed to hit there. But like, it's not as though for the vast majority of content, this is going up through Savage, I should say, not including things like Ultimate. With that tandem working together, we're good. Where there are the big upfront loaded hits, we have the shields to mitigate. Where we have the large punishing heal checks as well as the damage over time that they've increased, we have what we need to deal with it. So I do think it's a good co-healer in the sense that it's not as though you're going to be lacking for something. It's not as though you're going to be scraping for something that you desperately need in the vast majority of stuff. Now, does it have a great interplay and incredible synergy with other classes? I wouldn't necessarily say that. It just does what it does well.
Me
know what I
green
mean?
stuff,
Yeah.
go up.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So it's not as though it's like, oh, it works so great in tandem with this, and if the two of you, and I think that's the case for many classes in 14 because they've chosen to try to separate them out so much without to avoid things like synergies contributing to domineering metas. But I think it's a good co-healer.
I think if if Temperance buffed the other healer's heals, it would be a little busted, but would probably lead more to that. Asylum does buff Asylum buffs all of the healing that's done to people inside of it. So it does buff your co-healer. Temperance only buffs you. That's why there's two buffs. There's one that's on the white mage, and then the damage reduction buff goes on everyone. And I think that might be the closest thing to like interplay that the class could get. I would really actually like to see some kind of... I'd like to see a different version of Asylum. I would like to see some kind of like Grove mechanic kind of thing, right? Because like, let's go back to... class fantasy is a big part of one of the reasons that I think everyone... Right.
Yeah.
White mage doesn't do anything nature-oriented anymore. Right? We lost all that and we got Light Warden stuff. For Light Warden reasons, I guess. Like, it makes sense in the context of Shadowbringer. It's great, but like, now we don't. So I'd like to see something that makes us a better co-healer. I'd like to see something like, you know, we're going to give up our healing to buff our co-healer shields, or we're going to, you know, spend time setting up something to help with the other side of it, right? I would like to see a little less glare maging, a little more synergy.
Maybe the white mage could be the one passing off MPs since they also have the free heal.
Sure.
I think that would be really cool.
Agreed.
And I would be 100% about that, especially if they do it in like a water form, right? Maybe they bring back something like
Here's a
fluid
glass of
aura or a water thing, right? Because that's one of our traditional things is wind,
Yeah.
water, and life.
You're looking a little dry there, friend.
Become moisturized.
It's baptism. Have the MP. Have the MP. Have the MP.
Yeah, and you know, I only asked that co-healer question just because of perception from non-healers in that, yeah, white mage just does what it does, and it doesn't really have any interplay. And hearing that that's what you want to see, you know, that was the next question, is what do you want to see in Dawntrail? More of that interplay. I mean, it's great to know that you have a white mage, so you're good, right? Like, that's always what I hear as a non-healer. Oh, okay, white mage, whatever, that's going to be fine. Astro, sometimes people are a little weirded out by. We'll get to that. I know. But it's good to hear that from healers that, no, that's not the real perception of it. That's just what they do. They do the damage, or they do the healing.
We also do the damage.
Yes, that's true too. Very true.
And I think okay,
Yeah.
so one of the problems, and I think Alk is being nice and not calling me out for it, is that it can be hard to know when the white mage is under healing and over focusing on damage.
Sure.
Right? Because it's our default rest state, right? The default rest state is, are people missing HP? No. Is there a massive heal check coming up? No. Then cast glare and check again in 1.5 seconds. Right? That's our flow chart. Is Dia up? Excuse me. Is Dia up? If it's not, it should be. What are you doing? 2, are you going to cap on lilies? If so, probably blow 1 for no value. And 3, are you casting glare? If not, fix that, right? And one of the problems it can be hard to tell when other people are throwing a lot of stuff. And I think this is a healer problem in general. When we talk about co-healing, it can be hard, particularly with Sage, to see what the balance is, unless you're really communicating about exact timelines between the healers. Because I know I have definitely underhealed Savage fights, and Alk has definitely covered for me. And that's been a problem, right? Because I need to be pulling my weight, and it's hard to see that effect.
To be fair, that's partially my fault. I safety heal a lot.
That's true. We both, I think, are of the mindset that we would rather overheal than have someone drop, right? Because like overheal is
I love that mindset.
No, it's a meaningless number, right? If you're gonna be like, oh no, my bars, right? Like whatever. It's like, right?
Everyone died and you had to restart anyway.
Right. Death is a mighty large damage down, right?
Yeah.
You know, a lot of non-healers think overhealing is a problem, but it really isn't.
I think it depends on the overheal.
Sure. It really depends, but I think in most situations,
cure botting. Cure botting is bad overheal. Don't do that.
Yeah.
I had an issue. Now, of course, this is going back into ultimates, but I was filling in a party finder, and I cleared T on Sage, and I had a white mage as my co-healer, and we did great. We got through it. I filled in as a white mage with a scholar, and I was just pumping out heals left and right, and I'm like, I cannot keep this party topped up. What's going on? Well, they weren't healing. and I was like, okay, so there's got to be a balance somewhere, because like white mage can do a lot, but I can't do that solo.
Yeah.
And I think they're just going back to the co-healer thing is like, you got to synergize with your co-healer.
Right.
You guys have to communicate, and like there is content in the game that you cannot solo heal. A lot of it you can solo heal. There is content that you cannot solo heal, and so it's all about that synergy.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, key example. Very rarely, outside of very large multi-hits, do you ever actually want to use Panheima and Bell on the same thing. As an example, right? And you actually want them to be staggered a bit because they only line up at 6 minutes, right? Because one's a 3 and one's a 2, as an example, right? So like that's a good example of like you want to talk to your co-healer, because there are definitely times where I like put out Bell and I haven't communicated that, and then I see Panheima and I'm like, my Bell's not going to get any value. Oop.
Or whenever you've got a Astro and Scholar decides to pop a last second recitation crit low spread on everybody right as the Astro used macro micro, and now nobody takes any damage, and that macro micro is useless.
Yeah. And that's a big part of co-heal too, is that you have to like be watching your co-healer's bar if you're not in comms, because some of our tools are long cooldowns, right? Benny, like I have to call every Benny, right?
Right, yeah.
Because like otherwise it's just wasted value, right? Because Benny is a silly tool, right? Because Benny is my favorite heal because it doesn't have a number. It says all of it. It doesn't say potency a million. It doesn't say whatever. It says all of it. It says you are healed. I have healed you, right? Go. That's it. And I love that. But it's a 3-minute cooldown for that trick, right? So
we cannot mention Benediction and not talk about one of my favorite raid moments with Rook. I do not remember who you healed, but she screams into comms, "You got Benedict, son!"
Oh yeah, it was pretty good. I do.
It was amazing.
Yeah,
Look,
fantastic.
I'm a generous healer. I will dick everyone.
Right. The question is,
on my cooldown when I'm able to.
Right. I was gonna say, and does that mean that you also benediction for uptime?
No.
Good though. It's really good though. No, the uptime is incidental. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally incidental.
It's a real question. Does the uptime come before the dick, or does it take the uptime? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, everyone, for being the way I am. But
No, it's fine.
No, it's good.
No.
Never apologize for being
good.
you.
No, this is good. This is good.
Yeah.
in all honesty, I can't even claim full credit for that. One of my moderators, Mix, was the first one that ever yelled, "You just got dicked" at me after using benediction. And ever since then, I just can't stop. It makes me laugh so hard because I'm basically a 10-year-old boy inside, I guess. But yeah, I mean, we've chatted, about a lot of the stuff with White Mage. And I mean, it is something where I think that it has a good solid place right now. It is a good co-healer in the sense that, I think it does anchor things down very well. The toolkit, again, being very flexible. But I mean, of course, like Alchemy was saying, there's not really, in high-level content, there's not really a point in which a lot of times it's a solo heal thing, right? So of course it has to work in tandem. And communication of stuff like those major cooldowns that you have at any point in a timeline of a fight is something that I think everybody ends up having to negotiate. And with some of the things that we did get in Endwalker, I think that, like with the Lily Bell and other tools, there is a bit of that, even more so now, right? Trying to make sure you're pacing those out and when and where you're using them. Not that that wasn't something you had to do previously, but a few of those tools that were given to each of the healers very much feel like okay, well, we really need to make sure we're not like overlapping these things because we'll probably use this to get through this specific, mechanic later, or we'll use this here or there kind of thing.
Yeah, for Harrowing Hell, you start at Harrowing Hell and work backwards. right? And so they're like, if you're white maging P10, and I'm mostly using P10 because it's probably the biggest heal check in the X-Pack, I would say, at least that I'm aware of.
That isn't an ultimate.
Yeah, that isn't an ultimate. Yeah. You start there and you work backwards. So like as a white mage, there's a last second where I'm allowed to use Bell before that, and so we have to like route everything around it. But that's
the fun of healing, though.
it is. No, it absolutely is. I just wonder how cognizant the community is of that when we talk about white mage as a co-healer or about co-healing in general, right? About how like you and I sort of started Jaegering co-healing for a lot of particularly tier 2. Where we'd gotten used to each other's healing styles, and there were only a couple of things that we had to like diagram out, and like I think most of it was 7 because we were desperately trying to figure out how to get the right amount of healing in during harvests.
Well,
because
and that was
there's
one of
a
those...
chance that we're next to each other during harvest, which is just like, and everyone else is on a different platform over there, and we're in a corner, and we're just standing at each other like, I hope they're okay. I can't do anything from here.
Well, and tier 1 and 2 was so weird for us because, like you said, like he stuck to white mage, but I swapped healers 3 times. Oh. And I don't mean I swapped healers 3 times total. I mean, I swapped between the other 3 healers multiple times. So like depending on the fight, so like P1, I was a scholar. P2, I swapped to Sage because we needed the damage. P3, I went to Astro. P4, and P7 was one of those, I had progged the entire fight as a Sage, and we got to not harvest, purgation or whatever it was. We had to run between the 2. And I was like, it'd be really nice here. Expedient. And so then it was like one of those, we had to completely redo the entire fight in one pull. Pretty much. And it was like, okay, reprogging and go from there.
Right. And so when we talk about co-healing, like that part of it's both what your co-healing class is and who your co-healer is. Right. And that bit,
would you say, because I kind of think so, the synergy between co-healers is the most important synergy between like, the tank synergy is important. You're going to be able to swap the boss back and forth, I guess. But...
And maybe use mitt on each other.
Yeah.
It touched reprisals again.
Yeah.
So often. So often.
All the time.
Right.
But healers is at a different level, I feel.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I think you can tell when 2 healers co-heal really well together or not. Because
you're not dead.
Yeah, exactly. You're not dead. In theory, you should not be having to worry at all about what's going on with your healers. And like when your healers are just like constantly tripping over each other, constantly like, struggling in that sense, that's where you feel that lack of synergy the most because it does really affect, it has a big, repercussion for the rest of the static or the rest of the team.
And I think that this goes back to something that Rook was mentioning earlier too about the desire to play strategically. I think that co-heal content is one of the places where like healer has a lot of silent strategic play. We get stack markers and we have rescue. And those are both big positioning like moments, right? Of where is the stack gonna be? So for instance, we were farming what's the giant idiot boy? Not Zeromus, the one before him, Golbez. We're farming the idiot boy.
The giant idiot boy. I was like, there are so many. I don't.
Right. Look.
Narrow it down.
Right. Okay. We fight a lot of giant idiots. My bad. And Revan and I were co-healing, and one of the only positional callouts, and we were doing it one after the other, repeatedly, was where our group was going to be for stack markers, right? Or which side our light party is, because like tanks are busy doing tank things, and we're generally the one that's looking after the 2 DPS, right? Not in like a field trip kind of way, but a little bit in a field trip kind of way. About where the light party's going to be, right? And so like keeping that organized is part of that strategic play, and that's another place where co-healers like can really trip over each other.
I also just feel like healers need to know the fight the best.
Yeah.
And like, it's fine. People can disagree with me, but like, healers not only need to make sure everybody is topped off, they need to make sure everybody's in the spot that they need to be in. They need to be paying attention to the tank's health as well, making sure that they're hitting everybody with their mitt and their heals and this, that, and the other thing. Like, I feel like I definitely learned fights on a complete level better when I was on healer than when I go in as a DPS.
I think there's
DPS
also
is brain off, do my mechanic, go.
I think there's also another part which we haven't touched on yet, which is very Endwalker specific, which is body checks.
Oh boy.
Right? When we're right. Yeah, I
Yes.
saw that, Alc. Right. Body checks are one of the reasons that I would contend that if you are the kind of healer who is like me, I am very reticent to call walls, right? Just because I want to try and fix it, right?
Yeah.
And yes, I'm talking to my therapist about that. It's fine. But the desire to fix it, right? And so if it is going to be fixable, you have to know the fight well enough to put the person as they res in the right spot that you know that they are supposed to be in, and then get to your spot and not kill everyone.
Anytime a healer does that, I'm just going, oh, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
I watch
Looking at DSR specifically.
Right. So I've been following along with Alchamee's static doing DSR, and I watch Revan do this on a regular basis with some mechanics, and he's like, I can fix this, and I'm like, how in the world can? Oh my God, he fixed it! What the hell is going on? Right. But like that kind of mastery, I think, is a lot of that silent skill expression that doesn't show up in numbers, that doesn't show up in necessarily clear times, but shows up in we didn't wipe this time and got to see more of the fight. And we still might not clear because of damage downs or whatever, but we got to see more of the fight during prog is a big part of the knowing the fight thing that Alk is talking about.
Yeah.
We had a question in chat. Apart from your co-healer, do you care about your tank pairings when you heal? And do you have healer preferences for certain tanks?
I think this is a
Those
great question.
faces say no.
Well, this one expansion ago, this would have been a very different answer.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad you asked this, Chris, because I think it's a great question. When I was raiding in Shadowbringers, I would have told you I hated Dark Knights. I'm so sorry. They're so strong. They're so strong. And they were, I mean, amazing. And there were many, many, many reasons you would bring Dark Knights in. But the finickiness of, as a white mage, being almost solely responsible for saving all of my benedictions exclusively for them, and only at the exact moment when they had used the full duration of Living Dead. The timing on it was so specific, especially because I was doing a bit of ultimate prog in that expansion as well. There were moments where the timing, again, it was so specific that it was disruptive to the rest of my healing demands, where like I'd be having to try to figure out how to line up my cast times and everything else that had to be done to heal the rest of the group, while also trying to figure out exactly when to get this benediction timing in. And that was something that was really punishing. It wasn't to say that I wouldn't do it, but it was just one of those things where I had several people who even would come in here or there on pugs and stuff on Dark Knight who would get very like furious or entitled about it if you were off with your timing as a white mage with benediction stuff.
People started making macros when they would use their Living Dead.
With a countdown.
Exactly. That would have like a specific countdown timer for you and stuff. Now in Endwalker, because of many of the changes that have happened for the cooldowns for tanks, it's pretty much the same. It's not, sorry, the same as in across the board, all of the tanks are about equal, not the same as it was in Shadowbringers, I should delineate. So it's one of those things where at this point, it does not bother, like it's whatever, whichever tank is there. Paladins perhaps are the ones that are the least healing intensive as far as their cooldown management goes from a healing perspective in my book. But
and warrior.
Even so,
War.
well, yeah, exactly. Warriors, even with home gang, can just heal themselves. And Dark Knight now as well can recuperate the health. So while there are times where I'll say to the tank, you know, I'll just benediction you here because like when else am I going to use it unless it's like a spot emergency or something to keep somebody alive. It's really negligible, at least from my perspective at this point. I don't know if you all agree, but
The only preference I give to War some of the time is how good Shake It is. Shake It is probably, I'm going to go with too good.
Yeah, I think if I'm...
Don't tell Yoshi B.
I think if I'm separating like the benefits of the different tank mids and just going strictly off them and their solo tanking, Dark Knight's still probably my least favorite, just because it has so limited self-healing tools outside of using their Living Dead. You have one.
Yeah.
Like, you've got TBN, and that's great, but you've got Abyssal Drain or whatever it is, and that really only works on trash packs. Like, so, and I know there's like a little bit, I think, with the 1, 2, 3, but overall, I think maybe that's my least, but in general, I personally don't have any issue. Again, like Rook said, an X-Pack ago, definitely that and Gunbreaker, because nobody knew how to use Gunbreaker's toolkit when it first came
Benny
out.
was the worst thing ever.
Gunbreakers were so squishy.
It's very fun. Gunbreakers are still squishy.
But I mean,
get-
a
if
lot
you
of the
get
tank
a-
smiths now are just so good that I don't really have an issue with any of them.
The 25 seconds for everyone but Dark are probably the biggest thing. Whatever the Warrior one, Blood Wedding, Heart of Corundrum, and whatever the shield gauge move is for Paladin.
Intervention?
No, the self one.
Oh, Sheltron.
Yeah, Sheltron. Holy Sheltron. Yeah.
Yep, holy, yeah.
Those are all an absolutely egregious amount of healing.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And especially if you're in 8s and your off tank isn't actively taking damage, they're a third healer, right? Especially if it's a Gunbreaker. If your off tank is a Gunbreaker, you have a third healer because they've got 2 charges of Aurora and Heart of Corundrum every 25 seconds, and their 1, 2, 3 takes care of themselves for the most part. And I really like Belied when it's planned because I go, regen, maybe a Lily, you're fine. I'm going to go deal with everything else now because it's an actual invuln, right?
Yeah.
Not
I'll take Belied over Home Gang any day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. Sure.
Our Gunbreaker just loves taking care of the rest of the party. Like, they won't necessarily help with the main tank, but they'll be like, dancer in the corner, you're not dead anymore.
Yeah,
And I
our
appreciate
Gunbreaker in DSR will, like, if I get meteors, since he's like right on top of me, he'll just throw a heart on me and send me on my way.
Yep.
It's good.
Keep going. Go do a crime.
Go do a crime.
She's not playing a Lalafell. I'm the Lalafell. I'm the one that gets patted on the head. Go do a crime. And you're just like holding the knife like, yes! Yay!
Great.
I know.
Now, oh, sorry.
Oh,
I'll
no,
do
you go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, you might actually have just been about to do the exact same thing that I was going to do, which was that I was going to say
They're
that
sharing brain cells.
we're all in one brain cell here. Which is, I was going to say, we have 2 healers technically left to discuss, but we are also coming up on our 3rd hour.
Yes,
So let us pose this to all of you here right now. Do we want to hit these last 2 real quick? How are we doing? That's what's the
Vibe
temperature check? Vibe check.
That's up to you guys.
Yeah, I'm good for as long as you want to keep having this conversation. You asked me to come and talk about healing. I'm like, I'm down. Sure. Great.
We traditionally take way too long because we do the things, and I think that with the other jobs is what I was going to say. We've hit a lot of the co-healing and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Tangent. So I think to finish out White Mage, as we're thinking about this, what needs to be added? You said, Will,
like nature.
kind of more, nature
So I want if we're gonna do plant, right?
Yeah.
Like funny because it's both a lily and we put it in a. Okay, great. Anyway, making sure everybody got it because explaining the joke makes it funnier. I would like us to have more of a like Druidy mentality. This is probably best exemplified by the fact that I still run around with Ingram Recollection glammed over literally whatever my White Mage weapon is. Ingram Recollection is the tree stick
Yeah,
from
tree stick.
Shadowbringers that's covered in leaves and crystals, right? That's my vision of White Mage. So my wish list is going to be very like nature focused and very like life, like sort of druidy focused. So I would like our level 100 skill, whatever it is, to focus on that more. In sort of in sort of like a sustained regeneration, help the co-healer sort of way. Right, sort of cross temperance with Lily Bell, and I just named 2 capstone skills. Deal with it, and sort of that kind of vibe. Right, is sort of what I'm looking for.
I liked your earlier suggestion, Will, about something that would allow for more kind of direct synergy with other classes. Like we do have things like you're talking about with Asylum, where yes, that now will do this like heal boost for other heals cast in the area. But I love the idea of being able to somehow help or buff or in whatever kind of way. It doesn't have to be just a damage buff on everybody, but just something that, either you could pass something, your mana over, or you could, enable something that then if you did thin air or if you did something else would like transfer the effects of that to your co-healer or to somebody else of your choice. Or I just think something like that could be cool, because White Mage, I don't know if I'd say it's like the selfish healer, but it kind of is, right?
It is.
So I'm fine with us like playing into that. If they don't want to like expand out, our DPS or whatever else, like it's, you can do whatever, but I wouldn't mind if we had something that also kind of gave us a bit more of that synergy.
You know what White Mage needs? A special movement button.
Sure. Movement ability, sure.
Like the Sage zappy to the other place button. What's that? Icarus? Icarus.
Icarus.
Yeah.
Because you definitely fly too close to the sun very often.
Well, you do have that in PvP, which is so nice.
Right?
Like, I love
you have Seraph Strike in PvP, which is so good.
Oh, Seraph Strike, or give me the giant laser. I'll take that too.
Giant Laser is amazing. Especially because it's stunned.
That's actually just Holy 5.
Yes.
It's a laser.
Well, it's a Lily move
forward.
in PvP. It's a Flatus
The Flatus.
Ultima or something.
Laser
I don't-
beam.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have the lilies, we have the light effect. I think they could expand off of into that nature theme, like you were saying, Field of Flowers or other things like that. Where I love the
slide
idea of the
through a field of
grove.
flowers.
I think that's so cool.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff they could do.
Well,
Just all of the jobs that don't have that, give it to them.
And
So
one
terrible.
One movement skill per healer would be nice.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Just because, like we were talking about, where the stacks spawn, right? We generally, not always. I know there are stacks that aren't on healers, but like healers generally get stack markers, and just being able for us to put that somewhere. Also, I'm gonna commit some heresy.
Okay.
Level 100 somewhere. Give us a mechanic where the actual solution to the mechanic is to rescue someone. Please. It's such a cool idea, and it just gets used for trolling.
Yeah.
Please, just once. I would like one fight. It doesn't have to be a big fight. It can be a Hildebrand fight. I don't even care. One fight where the solution to a mechanic is to rescue someone. Please and thank you.
I
Did
would
you
like
know
to
that?
bring up
Okay.
our regular all healer runs.
Oh my God.
You wanna go over that trolling thing again?
Okay, wait, hold on a second. Wait. What do you make everyone agree to before we go into the all healer runs?
PvP.
Right, yeah, you make everyone agree to full PvP. That's actually where I use Aquaveil the most, because I abuse the heck out of Lilybell, Benediction, and Cure 3 to main tank, because I know how to generate the most aggro on White Mage overhealing. So I generally make myself the main tank and then just start regenning myself constantly and using Aquaveil to live through tank busters. It's a lot of fun.
It's chaos.
It's absolute chaos, especially because if it's an AoE tank buster, I will murder people with it accidentally.
Everyone does.
I'm generally not
Icarus,
doing it on
the
purpose.
Icarus rescue thing has become.
Oh yes.
Yep.
That interplay is great.
Yeah.
I accidentally trolled somebody with rescue the other day. It was in that same World of Darkness. The tank, I think they had to be brand new. They didn't know in the very first fight with the Ahriman that if you get Doom, Well, first of all, that you had to look away to not get Doom. And then if you get Doom, you go and stand on one of the glowing platforms. So after they died 3 times, and I had to raise them 3 times, I went to the platform, waited for them to get Doom, and then pulled them to the platform, and then ran away. And in that moment, that platform became the place where the stun and automatically kill you mechanic happened. So it was kind of like, well, you were going to die from Doom anyway, but that's a little bit my bad. Sorry.
Your life is literally in my hands. I was
Yeah.
gonna say
They just died faster, so I could raise them
Yeah.
faster.
I do
No
a lot
countdown.
of tabletop.
Yeah.
A lot of tabletop stuff. I want you to know that in the Final Fantasy XIV tabletop that is coming out, rescue is a thing. It's an
Oh,
ability
is
that,
it?
yes, it is. It is a thing. So that's going to be hilarious.
Go on, tell me more. I'm very excited.
Oh, yes. Oh, believe me, we had an episode deep dive into the TTRPG. I'm translating more from when they played in Japan. Stay tuned, because I can't wait to play that thing. Well,
Yeah, I mean,
so
honestly, I would be fine if rescue was like if there were mechanics where
Mm-hmm.
the amount of time needed, right, meant that you either needed something like the like a class like dancer that's able to do the swift leaps in rapid succession, or a rescue from a healer. I would honestly be fine if they wanted to do something
Sure.
like that, where you had to do that, or whatever else,
would
just
help.
to give some other facets to stuff, active ways to engage in content. Be cool.
yeah. Well, it looks like we're soldiering on,
All right.
Squalla.
Oh gosh.
and that's that
Soldiering
kind
on,
of segue. Yes, soldiering.
tacticianing on.
Yes.
That's a different
Strategizing.
job.
I feel
right.
like
Uh-huh.
these two, by the way, are the other two,
Yes.
right?
Exactly. Right.
And like, it's not. I don't think it. And maybe anybody feel free to disagree with me. I feel like Sage White Mage are the favored children, and then these two are also Rans. Like they are
Yes.
also here. They are also healers, right? But they
Just-
haven't gotten the design love, right?
face that I'm seeing on Alchemy right now. Just like, yep. Mm-hmm.
I got thoughts on Astro.
Yes.
right. Yeah.
Okay, Scholar was a meme when everyone saw Expedient and went, huh, who would ever use that?
Everyone.
They were wrong. They were
Oh, yeah.
absolutely wrong.
It went real quick from being a meme to being the most useful tool.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Real
His
fast.
ranged over here jealous, like, "Ugh, what about Peloton?
Yeah.
No! How rude is it? How rude is it that Scholar gets expediency, but Peloton still has not been enabled for in-comp?
Huh?
Gotta make Scholar relevant, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
but
It's
still.
fair-ish, but also, ugh,
I
mean-
mean, Bard just is supposed to be we'll get there when we get to DPS, but like
Oh, no.
Bard is supposed to have buffs. So like to me, I think you could easily do that. But
Buffs.
it does, yes, but I do feel like expediency. Scholar has never been bad, right? It's maybe okay, maybe
That
there
is
are
not
some spots
true.
that I don't know about. Well,
Some sort.
back when we only had White Mage and Scholar, there was a span of time where
Okay.
Scholar was bad.
okay,
Sure.
but I mean like probably having
Recently.
Sword on.
Yes.
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah, like it's always held its ground as far as numerically how it can perform.
Right.
In general, from my understanding, I could be wrong,
Yes.
but it never. I don't know. It feels like sometimes the setup, sometimes the like, or it just has very. I don't know. I always feel like a good Scholar makes a big difference, but it's not always something that just stands out otherwise, like outside of an exceptional player playing.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make any sense? I don't know. I'm
Is-
trying to
is
put
it-
my.
Is it that both Astro and Scholar pay heavily in personal outgoing everything for the crit buff and cards? And so you have to look at the fight in aggregate, and unless you're doing crimes, it doesn't feel like you're doing as much because your
Uh-huh.
stuff isn't as cool.
I think
Right.
that's more true for Astro than it is for Scholar. I think
Sure.
Scholar suffers from the setup tax.
Mm.
Their shields and their mitt takes a lot more time to set up than Sage's does. And so a lot of people are just like, well, Sage, I can just do on the go. And so they don't want to play Scholar anymore.
Right. Right.
The
And I
pet is
mean-
also kind of a weird component of
Yes.
Scholar.
Those insta-casts on Sage are real nice.
Man, the pet, that was one of the huge changes in Endwalker as well that didn't get a lot of talk with kind of the pet queuing and how much easier it is to tell it what to do.
Mm.
As a previous summoner and a dabbler in Scholar, you can learn to deal with it, but now it actually does what you tell it to do most of the time. Still not all the time. And that made it made people who weren't going to play Scholar play it a little bit more, but I don't think it made them stay. What do you guys think? Like, did anyone even notice it?
I think part of the problem is that it's really hard to, like, the fairy is hard to see if you're not the scholar, hard to perceive, right? How many of you actually look at where the healing you got came from? Do you look and see if it was the white mage doing a rapture or the fairy casting, I don't even know that embrace.
Yes.
Embrace, right? And unless you're looking at the feed, right? The scrolling numbers feed, right?
It's the only way we can do it.
Right. Yeah. Right. Of course. Right. But like in the moment, yeah. There's no other way to tell where it came from, so it's really hard to perceive what the heck. Like I don't think I could tell you that I've ever noticed in a spot that it mattered whether I got healed by my co-healer or the fairy, or if I'm running on a DPS by which healer, and I play healer most of the time.
Yeah. And again, it's like, it's funny to me because scholars are good.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, honestly, it's not anything where I would say, like, oh, I dread co-healing with a scholar. I don't. My co-healer right now in my current static is a great scholar. And there's nothing more satisfying than hearing him or the rest of the team go, what damage? Like when, you know, some huge hit rolls out and there's like, it doesn't even seem like it registered, you know? But in the feedback that I do hear, like, it's very good. I think it's a complementary healer. I think that it plays well with, you know, at least from my perspective with White Mage. The shields and other flexibility, things like the expediency have been very big for us, especially in movement heavy fights like that P10S Spider-Man Pandemonium. Like that fight has so much rapid movement and across different areas that, I mean, there have been many other fights like that throughout the tiers, but that one just comes to mind.
I don't like him called Spider-Man.
I'm sorry. He's because he's
he is a spider and he's kind of a man-ish castle, but it's not
Spider Castle.
Spider Castle.
Spider Castle.
Nightmare fuel.
Nightmare fuel. The fight, like that, definitely has it. It's very helpful and it plays a big role in certain phases for us. And I enjoy all of that. Now, would I say that like what was my original point on this? Hold on, I'm trying to think.
Lost in Spider-Man.
Oh, there it is. No, I got it. Spider-Man took it from me, but now I've fished it out of the web. No, it's good. But I will say that it seems that from what I've heard from my co-healer and things like that, that although we had the pet changes and other things that came in that perhaps took out some of the things that were kind of annoying or frustrating or little issues or stuff like that, that some of the big bang for your buck, big reward, little nitpicky kind of things that you used to be able to do that would give you a little bit more agency over popping some of those crits or fishing for the thing or lining up, kind of like how Summoner used to have like the unbelievable 10-paragraph short essay, like pre-poll shenanigan. Like, it seems as though in the past, although Scholar was far more convoluted, that folks, once they figured that they had cracked the code, got more out of it in a way that felt satisfying. Whereas there's nothing wrong with it. It plays great. It is a complimentary good healer right now. But I don't know if it's hitting that same kind of satisfying, I really got into the nitty gritty of this and like really know it so well that now I can do these incredible things on it. I'm not sure if all scholars would agree, but that's the impression that I'm getting generally.
Yeah, you know, and that's what I've been hearing, you know, just looking around in the community, because it's hard to get scholar feedback. It really is. Like, looking around for it, there's not a lot of people screaming, you know what I mean? There's a lot of people talking about even smaller things like the Sage MP issue. But for Scholar, it's like most of them have gone to Sage. Like, it really does feel that way, right? What does it give you that that Sage doesn't, right? We talked about crit low. Is that the biggest difference? Does
That's
the Fey Union even matter? Does
Yes.
anyone use it?
Um,
Okay.
The expedient is great.
Mhm.
The thicker shields are great. I think it does a better job at overall like mitigation. What I hear the most that people complain about are people use the scholars that strictly use their ether flow for damage and don't save it for heals, and so they don't do enough healing.
Yeah. Where's the lustrate?
And so I kind of wish that Scholar had a GCD, like how Sage has Prognosis.
Mm.
I kind of wish, because all we have is Sucker
Yes.
as far as like a GCD heal. And that's a heal and a shield, and it costs a ton of MP. I kind of wish that, we could use E-tactics, but there's still the cost of the heal for that. And I don't know, I really like Scholar. I think Scholar's fantastic. I think with the proper co-healer, it's a super successful healer.
Yeah.
In like 8-man content. But I can see the appeal of Sage over Scholar right now.
Yeah, I and I asked the question because it's not any mechanical real difference. It's not that. It's just theming and feel and loss of deep knowledge. It is feeling different. Scholar is the only healer that I've ever really played, mostly because it came free with Summoner, and when I needed to heal, I already had Physic. So why not press it? Ever once, I guess.
Ow.
Yeah.
Physic. But
It's no good.
yeah, it's no good.
It is. I will say this. I know coming into Endwalker, even as I was prepping my own stuff with the media tour and, Gamerscape was, or we were doing our podcast leading up to it, or many people were looking at the footage and things, there was a real sense that Scholar was going to be absolutely crushed because of a lot of the nerf things, because of Sage coming in, and I don't think that has actually been the case. I think Scholar has held its ground great. And just like you were saying, Alec, I think with a good co-healer, with a good complement, I think it's incredibly powerful. So again, it's not anything where I think it's in a really terrible place, or it's on fire, or it's garbage, or it's nothing like that. It's just that perhaps in a lot of little facets, it lacks a little bit of its own kind of really satisfying, unique identity. And there are parts of it that shine very, very well, but that it maybe just doesn't catch people as much right now. Or
It's like Will was saying, there's no check mark once you get your little charge.
Yeah, there's not, like even little details like that, which I think can make a big difference.
Yeah. So I'm gonna real quick back up something that Alex said about Sucker versus Eucrasian Prog. Okay, so I just looked in the job guide. Sucker costs 1,000 MP and is a 200 cure potency with 160% potency shield, right? So it's a 3,200 potency shield, right? Or 320. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Sage. And it has a cast time, right? It has a 2-second cast time, and so you're standing still for 1.9 some odd seconds depending on your spell speed build. And Eucrasian Prognosis is 900 MP for the same shield. Eucrasian and cast instantly, right? Because Eucrasian Prog is 100 potency cure with a 320% shield, so it's also 320 potency, right? And so I think it's a lot. Part of it's the little rough spots add up to grit that negatively affects our perception more than the math, because the math is fine, right? But those little differences are really gritty and get in the way, which is why I think Alex's suggestion that just give them an instant shield would be good.
Well, not even just but it also just like a pure heal. A pure heal that's not in Dom.
Yeah.
Right.
Scholar is rough in that aspect. It really is, especially at lower levels.
Like your options for pure heals on Scholar are in Dom if you have a charge. Fey Blessing if you have just your regular fairy out. And then like E-Tac Sucker, which is a cast. That's basically it. Like, and then some lustrates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It just feels really hard on Scholar sometimes too. Can we recover? Yeah, it just feels harder and more punishing to try to recover on Scholar than it does on some of the other healers right now. Like where it's at.
Like...
I don't think it's in a bad spot. I think it's still in a good spot. I think it's underappreciated. But I do think there are some things that could make it comfier.
Yeah. It's a lot more planning for certain. It's like almost actually real life stressful, the planning you have to put in. At least from my perspective. It's why I do not play Scholar.
Why people bounce off of it, historically.
I did real quick want to grab a question from chat about the instant modifier on Sage, because not everyone's played Sage.
Yeah.
Eucrasia is a modifier with a shorter recast. So it's an instant cast with a 1 second recast. So you hit Eucrasia and then you hit the next thing a second later, but your overall GCD spins twice and it's the same. You stay in line with everything else, but both parts are instant.
Yeah, it's one of those things about recast that a lot of people don't get, because it's kind of really deep in there when you start to think about it. And it really only pops up on things like this, or on casters specifically, right? Like longer cast with a shorter recast, or vice versa. There was an issue with Summoner, with Ifrit, swift casting one of the abilities of Ifrit because it was a shorter recast. Yeah, it was not great, and they got rid of it. But yeah, that's one of those things where when you get really deep into the game, you start to see those. I mean, what can we say about Scholar in Dawntrail?
It also makes it a difference too, because if for whatever reason the person that you're healing has gone down to almost nothing, the difference between having a cast time and not having a cast time could save them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Server ticks are a thing, and we all know that. The quicker you can get that out, the better.
Yep.
I mean, it's not our job, but what can we do
What can we
for
do?
Scholar in Dawntrail? What do you think helps fix that grid, right? Does it need a summoner level rework?
Maybe give it some sort of charge ability, kind of like White Mage has, just like 2 things that make something instant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or 2 instant heals, yeah.
I was going to say, I would like something that just makes healing a little bit quicker at least once.
Give it a Tetra.
Yeah.
Give it a no charge Tetra.
Something that makes the healing just a little, like, makes recovery in a bad situation quicker, so you can recover, rather than, like, I'm dry. I've got nothing. Yeah. The only thing I have is Sucker, and it takes 2 seconds to cast it, and this move is hitting now.
Mm-hmm.
And my co-healer's dead.
Yeah.
Would it be, would you want something like Presence of Mind or Lightspeed? Something like that buff that you could use for something like damage in a pinch?
I don't think so, actually.
Okay.
I think that's something that White Mage and Astro has that gives them some kind of personality, especially because Astro's is supposed to be used for their burst phase. It can be used for movement, sure, but it is supposed to be used for their burst phase, and so is White Mage's. I think if you start to give every healer a buff like that or a boost like that, they start to become too homogenized.
Okay, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's...
You go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say it's tough because I think probably the most logical thing and the thing they'll do is like exactly like what we're talking about, add in a few more things that give a bit more flexibility. I am not saying that this is the correct opinion. I know many people feel very differently than I do. I am of the opinion that I would like to just see them entirely redesign Scholar. Mostly just because, I mean, we got to see that with Summoner. And while Summoner is not a perfect product, coming out of it, there's still a lot of stuff they need to do to add some complexity back into the class to build and expand out what they did. the actual class identity feels much stronger and much more coherent, and it is their current design mentality, right? Like,
Yeah, it's an
Scholar
exemplar.
like Scholar to me right now feels very indicative of the original, almost 10 years ago design of classes, which isn't to say that's a bad thing. White Mage still is
Right.
very much similar in many ways itself, but when you look at things like Sage, and earlier I was talking about how Sage feels like it's much more tightly designed, or even like Reaper. Like Reaper is super fun to play. It's got these interesting little phases. Like, that's not saying anything about the deeper, numerical, all that kind of stuff. But when you just look at the way that they're designing new classes around these concepts, I can't help but think that Scholar, were it redesigned now, would be massively different than this kind of like has a million tiny little hangnails from various iterations, grappling with clunky pets, grappling with this thing, grappling
I was
with...
gonna say, I think it's just kind of clunky.
Yeah.
That
And
was-
I feel like if they just redesigned the whole thing, if they got a better vision on how they want to tie the fairies and the strategy elements together, or if they, like, whatever it is, I think we would come out of it with something that at least thematically felt much more stronger. Like, look, whatever you think about, oh my gosh, Pictomancer. Whatever you think about
Sure.
the actual aesthetic of Pictomancer, because some people are very turned off by it. There is no mistaking Pictomancer. Like,
Right.
it has a very strong visual identity. It has I assume its gameplay will reflect that in some kind of way. And I think that were they to redesign the idea of a class with fairies and, the other ties that they have in the game, it would just be, aesthetically, it would sparkle a lot more on its own.
Outside of just doing Scholar glams.
Yeah.
It is just history rhymes, because this is exactly what was said about Summoner last expansion coming into this expansion. Almost exactly. Like, well, it just doesn't feel like it has the theme. It doesn't feel like it's hitting this.
The
It feels
two
like
dots and the
Yeah. right. It feels exactly the same. And I have always been a please split these two jobs truther since, I don't know, Heaven's Word. I mean, I've wanted this, and I think that it really could benefit from it, because I really feel that Arcanist and the shared whatever's going on with Summoner Scholar did not help it, and it probably is putting a lot of red tape in the way to do anything. Right?
Spaghetti
I
tape.
don't know.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet that one of the big problems that they would likely encounter is, from a back end perspective, giving everyone the new Scholar at the same level as their old Scholar, and not messing with gear sets, glams,
Right.
gear equivalencies, stuff like that. I think I agree wholeheartedly that they need to be split. I think it's likely an artifact of spaghetti code that they can't be, right? Because you can't screw up that database move, and that is probably the biggest database move we will have seen, right? Is to add a new class and give it to and then you have to do hotbars, right? Are they gonna make everyone redo all their hotbars? Right? What does all of that look like? The mechanics of it are so incredibly huge, given that Final Fantasy XIV runs on duct tape, spit, and prayer.
It is a primal, yeah.
Yeah.
This whole game is a primal. I don't want to give
mess.
Yeah, I don't want to give short shrift to Scholar either. I think we've identified a lot of the problems. I think that we identified what we can do. I just want to move on to astrology. Honestly.
Let's do it. I mean, look, we could have
Honestly.
spent the whole 3 hours
We
just
could.
talking about Astro,
We
to
could.
be
Yeah.
honest. And here we are.
I
we
brought
are.
you an astrologer.
Yes.
Oh, man.
So, all right. So going into Endwalker, right, we see the very shiny job trailer, and we see what was Macrocosmos, right? That was the first time we see it, and we hear the description. And to me, when I saw that, I went, "Wow, that is the coolest ability I've seen." I mean, Scholar has XCOG and things like that, kind of triggered heal, but this is the coolest one I've seen. Is it as cool as it sounded?
For
Is it
one
actually-
fight.
Okay. Okay.
One fight.
This is what I wanted to know, right?
like I said, like earlier, if you have a good enough shield healer, co-healer, macro, micro kind of isn't needed. They adjusted the potency on it, and I don't know. I don't use it as much as I would like to. I want more reason to use it. It is very rare that I use it and that it's doing something worth using it for. And that is part of it. I am usually healing either with Will or with Mocha, who's doing Scholar crit shields, but he does them at the exact moment that I use my macro micro, and then so if they don't take
It's a
damage,
TBN problem.
Now it will do nothing.
Yep, TBN problem.
if they don't take any damage, you know, it doesn't. It does an AOE, it does some damage, but at that point you're running into that same Astro, or you're running into the same issue where Earthly Star is now just overhealing just to do some damage.
Right.
Macro micro is now overhealing to do some damage, and it just doesn't feel good.
I agree.
That's my 2 cents on it.
Would it be fair to say that one of the problems is that we play healers to heal, not to use our biggest healing tools for damage?
Right.
Yes, honestly, yes, because the thing is that it's so true. Like when you're looking at, okay, well, what is my damage rotation? What am I doing in the downtime? What do I need for healing requirements? And then you look at all these abilities that have this damage side effect to them. And they all, you know, they have to be timed, or they have to be put in this like specific kind of situation, or they have to be, and you're just like, okay, well, do I just sit on these all fight and like only use them in moments when the timing is going to be whatever I need for whatever exact thing? Because as we've talked about, healing pacing is not always throughput in 14, right? It comes in these measured paced moments. So if you're like, okay, well, if I save these for healing, then I'm just not using a third of my kit. Like, okay, well then theoretically I would want to be using them on cooldown, and then I get the damage from them, but then I'm just healing people at whatever times these things go off if I just let them organically go. And I think for me, that's the big thing about Astrologian in its current state. You have like 50 abilities that are gorgeous. They look phenomenal. They have some of the best aesthetic in the entire game. They're just wonderful. And like Astro can be very fun to play compared to some of their healers with some of the activity that you can have in roulettes and stuff like that and flipping your cards. But the whole thing feels like this weird, redundant confusion where I just
Talk about Scholar being clunky. This is clunky.
Astro's really clunky to me. And it's not to say that you can't streamline it and you can't get it to a place that works better or rolls better, but I feel like I'm just that old person that's like, back in Stormblood when I played Astro. But the thing is that Stormblood Astrologian to me was so well tailored. Like, you had specific things in your kit that you could use in such specific ways. And then if you wanted to enhance your abilities, you know, you would use things like Celestial Opposition to extend out the duration to get more benefit of whatever you currently had applied. You would, you know, spread out and like constantly be turning over your cards. And even now when I'm in a roulette, I have to be so careful. Like, did the tank touch the thing that I'm attacking? Did the tank attack something? Did the DPS hit the thing? Are we in? Oh, well, I used my card and apparently they didn't, so I didn't get the seal for it. Okay, so I'm gonna do... But even so, you build up to the seals, and does it always feel like the thing that you're building to and using is something that is beneficial to, like, hugely as your role to a healer and is some kind of big thing that helps you? And no, because, like, it does help you, but... Also, it's not like it applies a balance to your whole party or something, or it's not like it's just
the
also
seals
weird.
suck too, because there's no way for you to aim to always get the 3. You take what you get and you use it, and then you move on to the next one. You take what you get and you use it. There's no way to be like, this time I would like for this to be this instead if I use this special ability. There's nothing like that, and you used to be able to do that or something similar with original Astro.
You can. This was a silent change. This was a patch note change that I didn't know about until I read the patch notes. You do now guarantee a different seal when you redraw, so you can guarantee 2. You cannot guarantee the 3rd.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Astro
And you only get 1 redraw now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you don't get sleeve draw. Right? That's the 3rd one that gives you the new thing that you didn't have before from Shadowlands.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. It's
I don't
just
know.
so weird. I'm sorry. I find
Well, and
Astro
then there's the
so
whole lord
frustrating.
and lady thing where
Yes.
you can't rely off that because
Yeah.
like you cannot rely on lords or ladies to do any of your healing in any kind of content fight.
Right.
Because it is always random. You could get lords the entire time, and if you're like, oh, well, I'm guaranteeing on this lady for this raid wide, you're not gonna get it.
Yeah.
So there's like this weird, the lord and lady thing now is just weird and clunky, and like it feels like it was like a second thought,
Yeah.
like an afterthought.
By the
Yeah.
way, in a theme that we've brought up before, I would also like to point out that Astro is a holy terror in frontline PvP. Right?
Yes.
Because it does all the
No,
stuff.
it's a gravity terror in frontline PvP. Sorry.
Well,
Sorry.
it's another case though of
How
the-
dare you be so good at this? Yeah.
No, I was just saying it's another case of the PvP rework solidifying a class playstyle. And granted, now they're condensing it down in a very specific way. They're streamlining it. But like lo and behold, the cards do different things again.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the abilities that you're using and the way that you can use them, it feels so much more impactful at any given moment. And it's, to me, it's just such a weird, redundant thing, like in PvE. It's like, okay, well, you have the cards. The cards have their own visual indicators, because originally those indicators told you what the card was, and then you had to know what that card did. But now, because they wanted to simplify it, you still have the original imagery. But then there's also a seal, and that seal shows up elsewhere in a small icon that has nothing to do with the actual symbol that appears on the card. That like, and it's just like, there are people who enjoy new Astro and some of the things that it streamlined, which I don't think is a bad thing. But this is one of the weird classes where in trying to simplify it, I feel like they just made it much more unintuitive in so many ways, rather than just being like, okay, the cards do different things, so yeah, you do have to learn that, but like, once you get that, you'll be fine. You know, and like all the other stuff with it, it's like, anymore, if I jump onto it, and I do enjoy running it sometimes, but if I jump onto it and I'm like, okay, wait, so hold on. This is the one that if I put it down, then after X amount, okay, but I can pop it, but then, and what does this one do? Okay, well, if I have the sect on, then I can put, okay, and then that one that's the one for the tank, I'll use that sometimes. And this, it's just like, it's very strange to me because it feels like you have a lot of stuff that sometimes you don't even need in the moment, but that's kind of watered down, but then is just sort of, I don't know. I think the whole thing is kind of a mess, and I really am curious to see what they're going to do with the rework on it,
It's
essentially.
52 card pickup. Astro is my very favorite healer. Late Heavensward iteration, where all the cards did something different, and when you got a card you didn't want, you burned it, and that made it AoE, or it made the buff stronger. That's the coolest iteration of Astro to me. I never play Astro now. They have to do something to it. Alchemy, please.
No, I love Astro. I just really want to see it. And unfortunately, it's the most reworked class next to Dragoon. But I actually think Astro beats Dragoon in that case, personally. I think Astro's had so many... I want to see Astro do more damage. Like, I know that they have to pay the party buff tax, but Astro's damage is sad. Like, we talked earlier about the deep dungeon stuff and how Astro's taking just shy of 10 minutes longer to do anything in deep dungeon. And it just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to play it. It doesn't feel good to be the bottom of the bottom with no chance of crawling out of it. It does have some of the best healing tools in the game, in my opinion. Aside from Essential Dignity, I have my issues with that one.
It's finicky.
But I don't know. I just want to see, Astro do just a bit more damage.
do you think that that comes in the form of flat potency buff? Okay, and not just like, because Astrodyne currently, the third effect of Astrodyne is the most insultingly annoying thing for the amount of work you have to go through to get it, right? Because the third part of Astrodyne is, hold on, let me double check here. I'm just making sure it's the spirit of something, and it's harmony of mind, and it is a 5% damage buff for 15 seconds.
Yeah.
That's it, right? Like. Now, we were talking a bit before this. Do you think it's just up the potency on everything, on parts of its kit, on like, and what do you think about the argument that often gets made up in this context about, well, you make it up in the party tax because you're a party buff thing? Okay, cool, great.
That only makes the party tax thing really only calculates out in 8-man content. It does not calculate out in 4-man content, and it does not calculate out at all in solo content. And I feel like that makes it feel really bad to take into a lot of stuff. Unless you're doing endgame raiding or you're in other 8-man content, it just feels bad. The damage feels terrible. And if you get into a dungeon with like, I don't know, whatever tank, and then an Astro and like like a bard and a dancer, that dungeon's gonna take forever.
You are screwed. It was
funny.
I often Go ahead. Oh no, I was just gonna say I often rail against the whole RDPS thing, which is a phrase that doesn't exist.
What do you
Don't
mean?
look
That's
that
not
up.
real?
Yeah, there's no way for us to know ever how much damage we're ever doing, and that's fine. But I rail against that because it is only because of the way that the game works right now, especially with the 2-minute meta, that those things are magnified to an extreme that you'll never hit in smaller content. You'll never hit in coordinated content either. You have to be super coordinated to do this. Not really super coordinated because the timers all line up to 2 minutes right now. But because of the far and away multiplication, it's just, you're not going to be looked at to give any damage because you've got your damage. It's just given to them. I don't even mind the fact that it's given to other people. I just mind the fact that we can't really see it, but we have to know that it's there. That doesn't feel good on any job at all.
I mean, I think they're at the point in the game where we have enough classes that do some kind of party-wide buff. And they have structured so aggressively around the concept of the 2-minute window that personally, I feel like this discussion of the utility tax is something that they need to just drop. It's just, that's not to say that from a class or design concept that you can't take into account that a class on its own may be contributing more to overall party damage and stuff like that, right? But this almost arbitrary feeling that if a class has some capability of utility, that its numbers have to be drastically cut to compensate is something that just it doesn't feel good for players. I'm not even a player. I am not the kind of person that is the, oh, numbers and potency, everything is so important. I go with the pump. I've got to pump all my stuff. I'm not even that kind of person. But when you see the impact that it has and the fact that even if you're just running a dungeon, you can feel the difference. If you're taking that class into something like a duty instance and that duty instance is dragging and dragging and dragging, it doesn't feel good. And as it is, with how they balance numbers and stuff, I really firmly believe that they are already accounting for these buffs and these baselines that now, and even more so, are just becoming prominent in the game. So I think you either have to just accept at some point that you're going to tune around the concept that this kind of damage threshold is going to be relevant in your endgame content and not punish classes for contributing to it, but rather adjust your baseline to account for it, or you just have to decide that you I don't know, you're going to make those buffs so relevant, or you're going to make some kind of allowance in solo content where you get a unique buff on those classes that lets you apply your cards to yourself, or like there's it's just
the moment that they added any kind of solo content, they should have taken that into account. Jobs like Astro, like Dancer, get screwed in solo content because, first of all, their own buffs don't work on them. Well, Astro does. Dancer's own buffs don't work on yourself half the time.
And it's not. Okay, so I'm gonna bring in something totally, like,
do it.
I'm gonna walk back. So I've been learning to play League, right?
Yeah.
Okay, League, and I'm gonna assume that nobody's played League, even though I know most of you have. League has two game modes. One of them is the Big Rift, and one of them is the Bridge. And the Bridge is a constant team fight that doesn't include a lot of the mechanics that the Rift does. And every champion is balanced differently for those two. There's a potency adjustment for every champion on the Bridge to account for the different circumstances that they find themselves in. And we have that, right, in the form of we have like the broad makeup buff that is Echo, or the super Echo, right? I think that there is room to, specifically for solo content, and I was thinking about Dancer too, to like take those into account. And I think that that's important the next time they touch that.
Even like,
I think, but I also think that there's a second part of this, which is, I think Rook and I have both kind of touched on this separately, and I think Chat did too. You wheel spin and it feels like you're wheel spinning in mud on Astro. It feels like you spin your wheels and go nowhere, because unless you can see the impact that you're making, right? Yeah. And especially when the animations, and this is kind of a Gunbreaker thing, right? One of the reasons that Gunbreaker feels like 3 DPS in a trench coat is because its animations are DPS animations, right? Yes. You can't tell me that Double Down isn't a DPS animation. Right?
It literally has an impact when it goes katoosh.
Right. Yeah. Big, chunky, I am a gun explosions, right? And Astro does it, like, has the big star pretty thing, right? And the things that you're doing most frequently don't have like a grippy animation, don't have the little check mark sound, don't have a thing that grips you to the notion that you're doing something worthwhile, right? And I feel like those two things, the reality of the numbers, especially in solo content, because I agree that that's ridiculous that Astro under strength is worse than Conjurer. That's
without
horrifying.
Strength.
Yeah, without strength, right? Baseline Conjurer, no Jobstone, no strength, is better than Astro with strength in terms of damage output. Wild. Like inexcusable almost, right? And then the second one is the fantasy problem, right? Like, how does it feel? And this is kind of the same problem that shares with Scholar, right? Is we're not accomplishing the high concept of the class.
Right.
I don't know. I think the looks of the job, like itself, the AF, for example, and some of the effects do absolutely do it. But then there are like the side little things that it has. Especially, weirdly enough, the ones that are on weird timers that are unhelpful to make them actually useful in a reactive fashion. It's just kind of like, and poop. Yep, that happened. Cool.
Yeah, it used to be at least that I think a sense of satisfaction came about in the class when you were able to line things up to do something that felt like you had made a choice and you had executed it. For example, like... I get this spread. Oh, I managed to get my balance. I spread the whole thing to the party. Or this is a more situational case, but every now and then it would happen and I still felt good about it. Like when your co-healer dies and you're like, oh, I've got my Ewer and I'm going to increase the potency and I'm going to put it on them and they're going to get their mana back at twice the rate, or they're going to, get like recover this so much faster and we're going to be in a good place. Or I'm in a leveling roulette and there's a tiny little baby tank and he is not using any of his cooldowns and he's in garbage gear and I'm fishing up bowls. All right, I'm going to hit him with these bowls. It's going to at least account for some of this horrible gear that he's wearing. It's gonna it's gonna help bring him up to a baseline where like healing him is a little bit better. And those were like looking at what you had, putting it together, managing to turn it into something that then you felt like, hey, I've made a choice, I've executed it, even with the RNG aspects of the cards. And now I know that for some players, the entire thing narrowed down to just balance. All I want is balance. Only thing I want is balance. Only DPS matters. But I don't necessarily think that that was enough of a precedent to warrant completely disposing of the idea of, varied buffs within the game. Which, I mean, are more difficult to balance for sure, but there's something that I still think allowed for a sense of gratification within it. Whereas now, like we were talking about, even if you go to all the trouble of increasing all your seals, your base damage is so low, the rewards are so underwhelming of using that thing that you've been trying to build for so long. Like, there are times where I'll go through stuff and I'm like, okay, the seals just aren't happening. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. Just like, I'll be like, it probably matters more in the long run that right now I give our DPS a buff than it matters for me to try to build to this bigger mechanic of my class. And like, that's something that I don't feel like carries the same gratification. And when you pair that with, not having like a visible feedback, auditory feedback of like impact or big impact, I mean, I like the sparkle tinkle effects and I like the star effects. They look amazing, but I don't always feel like the weight of what they're doing is of the same level as the animations.
Maybe it's just a personal thing. Like, I will absolutely agree that not all of the attacks have a cool like auditory feedback, but like the stars exploding, absolutely, and even the cards for me, I really like the sound of the cards, just like flip.
Now, see, when Astrodyne pops and people are missing health, and it does that heal, it is kind of nice because it's kind of got that like like everyone's health kind of like, and you're like, oh, that sounds good. But if it's just you're just using star because it's on cooldown, damage, boom, it's whatever.
Right. It's very indicative of the ability itself, right?
So, Al, you are a Nocturnal Sect stan until Dawntrail comes and, until the end of time. Do you feel like... yeah, right. Nocturne until dawn. Do you feel like part of the difference in Astro now is not only that the cards are sort of finicky, but like it feels like your toolkit used to have a lot of really interesting tools, and now they took all of them away and said, here's a bunch of hammers. Throw hammers at the enemy. You're not going to do a lot of damage, but like... no tools for you, only hammers. Does that feel accurate?
Not... because like a lot of the moves stayed the same. They just took away... whenever you went to Nocturnal Sect, those moves became a shield instead of just the heal. So they really only just took away the shield, except for on Nocturnal. Or Neutral. So not really. The only thing that was really nice is that if you did... Nocturnal, and then you did a shield, and then you did Celestial Opposition. You got the big shields, and that always felt really good because it also had a regen. It was great. But no, I feel like our toolkit didn't change a whole ton. It just became strictly diurnal.
It's it reminds me of something that I say all the time about this. Skill floor and skill ceiling, we all know that extended metaphor. But if you think about that room, for a lot of jobs in this expansion, it has imploded, right? Like, very quickly, that floor and ceiling just collapsed together. Out of nowhere.
Skill ruins.
Yeah, it just, the room has imploded. And that is having a whole lot of, I mean, people were saying that, yes, things are getting dumbed down. But it has a whole lot of it hurts more on jobs with more skill expression, but it hurts the most on jobs with more skill expression that also have the utility, right? Because you used to feel like you could get more out of your job, even though you were being taxed. And now you're still being taxed the same way, but now you can't get more out of the job either. It kind of is a double whammy, and I think we're seeing that. I mean, astrology, definitely. I'm not going to talk about Summoner on this show. I'm not doing it. I'm just going to say it's similar
Save it for the caster show.
Please, no. That caster show is going to be like 5 hours long. Only because it's just going to be me.
Day.
Yeah, it's just going to be me screaming into the void. But and that's why people are afraid of this rework. To get to Dawntrail, to get to the last bit of Astrologian. What does fix it? I mean, we've talked about a little bit, but is there a change that you think would really start that road? What is the biggest thing you think might need to be changed?
For me, it would be giving cards back their identity. Similar to, take away just the general, this just gives a caster, or this gives a ranged buff, this gives a melee buff. Give it something different. Take away the buff part of it. Maybe that buff goes to something else, like MP regen or whatever. Keep the divination for the 2-minute burst and give Astro some more damage potency. That's my ideal Astro for Dawntrail.
I would really like to see them just bring the PvP cards over, to be honest.
Sure.
The PvP cards are good. They feel good. The PvP cards go to the whole party, right? You hold them. You can only hold them for 15 seconds, but they go to the whole party for 15 seconds. It feels really good.
You want to spit a card out that fast anyway.
Right. Yeah. You want to hold it for the right moment, right? So you want bowl up, right? Which is a damage reduction for when you're getting pushed in on, right? You feel smarter. You feel like it's impactful in that same way. So I think they already have a model for the kind of thing that Al's asking for.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'd like to see them just make the cards do unique things again. And I think all the stuff that Alchemy was saying also just across the board would be great. I mean, coming into Endwalker, like we started the whole talk with, there was this idea of categorizing into pure shield or pure healer. And one of the things I did always personally love about Astrologian was the fact that it was designed originally to be a flex in its own concept. And I'm not saying that like it can't work as a shield healer or it can't work as a pure healer or anything like that, but like we kind of even discussed, I think that this categorization of pure shield, pure healer isn't something that it really seems like they full on committed to generally. And that if we are looking at getting another healer down the road and they want to try and even out, the sides of pure healer, shield healer, or whatever, having Astro be something that is a complementary flex in some kind of way, again, I think would be great. I would love to see it be able to do that. I would love to see it have some effect like that. We talked about PvP reworks, and one of the things I thought was one of the coolest concepts to come out of that is Red Mage, actually. And the fact that Red Mage, depending on if you are more aspected towards the light or dark, the white or black mana, you can like swap, like that's the kind of theming, the idea that like, you can lean more towards the white magic or the black magic or these kinds of things. And so in PvP, if you are aspected one way or the other, you can apply, debuffs or apply buffs. It's such a cool concept. And I would like to see them just revitalize something like that, honestly, even in Astrologian, in the sense that whether it's the flex of, you can go kind of shield or you can go kind of pure healing, or it's even just something like, like having the cards do their own unique things, streamlining some of those abilities that are just kind of like a huge wall of text and like kind of redundant with some of the other things in your kit. Just like streamline those aspects, give some more variety to others. And, I think that there's room for them to realize like, hey, we didn't actually 100% do the whole shield pure healer thing that we said, or, we can give this a bit more flexibility because like, it's not as though we've delineated those truly as two very, very specific categories,
I also think that the thing that they should not do under any circumstances is make another flex. I think that I saw some people in chat talking about chemist. I'm all on board for the chemist Mooj reheal thing, like 100%. I've been pitching that for like since Endwalker started, right? When I was doing the Endwalker playthrough, because you walk everywhere because you don't have the. You all know, right? When you're walking everywhere, you got to talk to chat about something. So we, theorycraft. And so I'm all on board for that. It can't be a flex, right? If there's going to be a flex, I think it's got to be Astro, because it's backed up in their story, which makes even less sense than it did before now, right? I just want to point out that like that's a casualty of this we haven't addressed yet, is that their story specifically references Nocturnal Sect as a thing, and you can't do it. There's actually part of the job quest where previously you had to use specific Nocturnal Sect things to reinforce wards in Kugane. Like it's in their lore and their story, and they had to change that to make this move, which felt really weird. It felt really bizarre.
Yeah.
Make Chemist a pure heal and make Astro flex.
Yeah, absolutely. Do that. But don't make it Chemist a flex and then leave Astro as a pure healer, because I think you're gonna it's gonna upset too many people, and I don't even play Astro, and I would be upset
Right.
if they did that, right? Because it feels disrespectful to people who, did the flex thing with it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Did we make it? Is there anything else you want to talk about with Astro? We're here to listen.
I guess the last thing that I would think about is that we know that a big rework is coming, right?
Yeah.
Supposedly it's getting overhauled for Dawntrail. We talked about what we kind of want to see with that. I mean, honestly, if they were to just be like, we made it Stormblood Ast, I'd be like, great, perfect.
Sweet, great, awesome.
Just copy
I'd
your
be
own
like,
homework.
cool, thank you. And, maybe they just, keep a couple
Sure.
of the new abilities or whatever. I'd be like, fine, that's wonderful, love it. But, I mean, is there anything that any of you can think of that, like, with this rework, I mean, we talked about things that could make it better, but, like, what do you think the worst case scenario of this
Worst
is?
case scenario.
Like, is it that they just don't do much? Is it that they just, like, completely strip all the cards down to just, like, a damage up button or something?
So they have decreased Astro's potency for DPS in general every single expansion.
Yep.
They have decreased it lower and lower and lower every X pack, and I think that would be the worst case scenario, is that they would continue to decrease its DPS because party buffs, and that would be my I would never touch Astro again.
I can think of a worse nightmare scenario.
Oh no.
Ready? I'm gonna make everybody, all the healers just cringe.
Oh no.
RNG based healing.
Oh no.
I'm just
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Will.
Yeah, right. No. It could be worse, right? It could be
could
worse.
There's a little bit in there already.
Right, with the Lord Lady thing.
Ladies,
Yeah. And I think
all
that's
of your heals were Lord or Lady cards. You either got DPS
Chat
or you
is just flying by now. Look what you've done.
let's not put that into the ether.
Yeah.
Look,
I
chat's
thought you were gonna
engaged
say-
now. I've done my job. Go me.
I thought you were going to say proc base, and then I was going to be even sadder.
Well, I actually think that there could be bring back Royal Road and make it like a proc chain buff system to help undo some of the stuff, right?
Sure.
So like
A chain buff would be cool.
right? Okay, so follow me down this rabbit hole, right? So Royal Road used to be a thing where each card that you played before another one hadn't snowballed, right? And you wanted to be on that, and you wanted to have some kind of continuity, right? Take out the RNG, make it consistent, but make it about drawing the card. You just have stacked the deck. You can read the future. Why are you shuffling?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you're really an astrologian, you can read the stars, you can see the future. Why are you shuffling? The deck is stacked already, right? Just draw the next card, do a proc buff system or something like that to at a bare minimum make it consistent instead of fishing for RNG for everything.
Yeah, that would make it very, very similar to just the basic 1, 2, 3, 4 in dance. Sometimes you get this, sometimes you get that. That could be cool.
Well, I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
No, I have faith that the reason they're reworking it is because they've realized that it has gotten it's a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
And again, it's not to say I want to be clear, because I know there's always some folks that feel very differently or have their own thoughts and opinions, obviously, which is great. That's the whole point of us all being different people. But I don't think that it's unplayable, or that again it's it's like something where I have been playing. I have been enjoying it. Even I just take it into roulettes and stuff. In certain cases, it's a nice change of pace, but I think that there have definitely been times or concepts in the game that have been executed more cleanly. And I think that right now where it's at, it's just a little bit odd in potency numbers, what it does, its concept. So I'll be very curious to see what they do with it. And honestly, I'm glad they're reworking it, because I feel like it needs it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's the poor shoved in a corner monk of the healer group.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Oh, here's the last one. Last idea I just had on Astro. Put all of the damage that they're missing into their dot.
Sure.
No, for real though. Make that the identifying outgoing damage thing, right? And it lines up with their whole like I'm gonna do the big buff window thing, right? You get the dot out under the buff window. That's your big thing, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that. That's another possibility. I think the most feasible solution, by the way, is Alex. I'm just spitballing other ideas. I think
The
Alex
buff
solution is the
dot
best.
It's just little meteors falling down the whole time.
Just little extra meteors, yeah.
See, I love dots. I love buffs for dots. I love extensions for dots. Astro can have all of those.
Well, Astro, I'm
they
just
won't.
looking. Astro's dot is the lowest potency dot too,
Huh?
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
10.
Yeah, and
That's
over
not-
4 seconds.
Yeah.
It feels a little hypocritical when, like, I feel like Ast just got really unfairly nerfed because for a while it was the only one that did what it did, right?
Mhm.
But then when we introduce something like Dancer into the mix,
Yes.
again, we're being confronted with this reality that, like, full party buffs that affect damage output are now a thing that is in the game. It's not just like one single class that's doing this that now has to be kept in line on a short leash just in case it, ruins the game or something.
I mean, it,
Right.
it always has been, though, with Bard. It's always been there. It's weird
True.
that they would mess it up.
I mean,
Yeah.
Bard is also in its own
Absolutely.
special little
hell?
box of. But Alk will tell us all about that when she mains Bard for Dawntrail.
No,
There we go.
no, never in my life.
We talk about a job that's been changed a billion times. Bard.
Oh, Bard.
You're
Oh,
this
Bard.
kind of Fizz DPS. Now you're a caster. Now you're not. Remember how you weren't before? Learn that
Now
again.
you get a healer LB3. Now you don't.
Ugh.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't want.
We'll talk about it
take
when we
the
talk
stupid
about
linear
it.
away. We never use it anyway.
I think we're
Give me back
just
to
at.
one.
I think like the big
Yeah.
thing is that this will be probably a talk that we touch on in multiple discussions across the board, from ranged fizz to caster to healers now. When it comes down to it, I think Square Enix for Dawntrail and ahead needs to just decide if they are truly going to acknowledge buffs as just a thing that is a fundamental part of the numerical landscape. And like, support as a category is something that, or utility is something that they have always been so apprehensive about. But I think you reach a point where if you're going to put it in your game and you realize that players have some interest in it in whatever capacity, then I think you just need to embrace it. I think you really just need to be like, we are going to introduce this into the landscape. We are going to baseline accommodate for it. And there are going to be classes that provide this and have a role for providing it. Not saying that like you have to be like Astrologian's now a support and it gets its own fifth party role in, but just something where you're acknowledging that this is a part of the landscape and compositions. And really that balancing only has to affect things like upper tier content in a lot of regards. But it is something that I think they need to account for, because it is unfair kind of when you look at poor Ast or stuff like that, where you're just like, just give them
My
something.
favorite thing to do in this game is do the little buff rotation, make sure everybody else is doing well, make sure everybody's mana's up, they have their DPS buff going, and it's slowly slipping away. And I'm just like,
It is.
stop it! I want to play this game. You stop.
So I actually think there's a place where we'll see if they adopt that mentality, and I think it's in the raid planner, right? Because we're getting the new raid diagram tool. If that raid diagram tool also includes a subcomponent for a timeline, like an in-game timeline constructor, right? Because that's well above board, right? You are allowed to, what those times are, right? You can run a clock on how long the thing is. That's all information the game gives you. No crimes required.
No.
You can do all of that, right? And so if we're given a tool that helps us with buff alignment, understanding how stuff works, planning that part, right? In addition to the positioning, right? Because they're giving us this tool that's going to be incredibly valuable, I think, for especially for Party Finder and for teaching sprouts and like mentor roulettes and all kinds of stuff. If they also give the high-end raiders a timeline tool in game, and you get to like, oh my God, this would be so good. You ready? You drag your party actions, you drag your action onto the timeline, and it like takes up the right amount of space and shows you how it relates to all the other stuff. If they do that, we'll be there, right?
Yes.
We'll be, and it's not too late. They could add that later on, right? Maybe they add that in like 7.1, 7.2 for like a Savage tier or something, right? But like that would be the cool thing that lets them do the thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Right. Well, I mean, I think we did it.
We did.
I-
We did
The
it.
only other
What?
question.
Long it's
What?
been. It's 4 hours. Incredible,
Yeah.
fam. We
It's-
did it.
it's-
It's
Yeah.
1 hour per healer.
It's
One
Yes, it
hour
is.
for
three
healer.
and a half. Just pretend. the
3 and a
first-
half.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it. Honestly, I could talk healers all weekend.
This is what I love to do, right? This is why I love to be on the podcast, and that we bring people from the community who have done the thing to talk about what they want to see and what they like seeing and what they don't like seeing, because that's what we're here for. I had another question about big healer changes. I don't know that I want to. That would take us a very long time. You know, I'm talking
rapid
about
fire. Rapid fire.
Sure. I'm talking about on the level of removing accuracy, on the level of adding direct hit.
Oh.
Oh,
Like,
oh,
No.
yeah.
Yes, it's coming.
Yeah. Let heals direct hit.
yep,
Do it.
I knew it's
do it,
coming.
you cowards. You won't.
Go
Just
to
do
the
it.
casino.
Just do it. No.
Oh,
Just,
she's thinking. She going.
no, she hates this idea. She
Yes.
absolutely, and to be fair, I think that direct hit on healers is probably one of the most weirdly misunderstood
Yeah.
niche, like high-end, weird stats crunchy things that I
Yes.
think is in just an awful place.
Absolutely.
Because it's impossible to understand inside the context of the game, and you need to do a lot of research elsewhere to figure out why you do it and how you do it. I'm gonna do one better. Make piety not suck.
Yes.
Yes, thank you,
Right? Like,
please.
Piety should be a thing you want some of. There is no reason in the world I should be running around with my base 390 Popito Piety that I have Stark Popito naked as I do in my 657 gear
Sure.
and have
So, like,
no MP problems at
heals?
all. And Alk
Yeah.
is melding Piety on Sage and still
Mhm.
has MP problems, right? Piety is in an awful spot and needs something to do, like, just make it interesting. You don't have to make it overpowered. You don't have to make it mandatory. Just make it a choice, because right now it's not, right? So you have useless materia that don't do anything, right? You have gear that's objectively bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? I spent most of this X pack, because I haven't cleared 11 yet, because raid burnout, right?
Yeah.
I've spent the vast majority of this X pack in a crafted 640 pentamelded top, because both the A raid top and the top from Tomestones have
Mhm.
piety in them. And I haven't done the math, but I'm reasonably sure I do more damage in my 640 top than I would in a 650 top that had piety as one of
Good
its
chance.
primary
It
substats.
definitely
Right?
happens.
And like, why are we doing that, right? Why is that a part of the game? Let's not
I
make that
don't
part of
know.
the game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we identified accuracy and TP as things that we don't need. We have not yet identified critical hit and direct hit as being a problem in general, but I think that they're working on that.
Yeah, I'd like to see them do something different. Like, I don't know exactly what this would look like. And I don't know if they would ever do it. But Materia, it feels like, is such an arbitrary thing that oftentimes so much of it is
Mhm.
just so useless.
Sure.
I would rather them do something more innovative, like Guild Wars 2, we have these new relics that have these like interesting passive effects, or they ESO. I know, Alki, we're talking about ESO, right? Like ESO gear sets that have those like interesting stacking effects, or they sometimes even give you bonus abilities or passive effects that trigger, or certain builds or things that they kind of enhance. Now, of course, like 14 does not have flexibility of build within classes and stuff like that, which I think is where you get the greatest impact out of it. But even just having something that would give us some more choice, some more options, some different things that we could swap in and out or use for different fights, or things like that would be very interesting. And I feel like would serve a little bit better than some of the stuff with, what we're seeing with, Materia or other kind of things with gear. I mean, honestly, I mentioned support category earlier, but genuinely, I would just like to see them actually implement a variety of buffs and or reasons to use buffs in the game, or even just expand out, like we were talking about earlier, some of the stuff with other ways to support your party be it positional stuff, knockback stuff, CC, some sort of new kind of mechanic, some kind of things that, you know, are in fights that like we need to account for, we need to take into account, we need to anticipate for, or use certain buffs to deal with. I would love to see something like that added into a healer support kit, or even expanded out to some of those other DPS. Just like shooting for the sky. I mean, yeah, I would love it too if they just redesigned some of the fights so that healing throughput generally was more active and, you know, more responsive, maybe a little bit less expected in its timelines and plotting. That's not to say that I don't love being able to also optimize DPS or whatever, but like, we have so many heals at this point, and I found it so satisfying for challenges like, you know, Ultimate, what limited experience I have with Ultimates, to just actually feel like I was having to use all my kit in its full spectrum and figure out what goes where. I think it would be fun to see that on more levels in the game. I think those are mine. What's yours?
Yeah. Rescue outside of combat.
Second.
You know, I've asked for that before.
There you go.
It's not just for trolling. Like, you legitimately could use that in some situations.
You can use it on Blue Mage, kind of, with like sticky tongue.
Blue Mage is great. Blue Mage is something.
Let's say you're
So Blue Mage healing then, just to
Yeah,
add.
Sure.
Blue
Yeah,
Mage.
100%.
Blue Mage with 3 different builds you can do tank, heal, DPS that you can take into instanced content. Yeah, thank you. That's
Sure.
not just
Well, with the
locked.
right build, my ninja can also tank in Delubrum.
That was so much fun. That was so much fun.
Yeah.
Oh,
There were 3 tanks, all with stance on, and I was still the tank.
Amazing.
to be fair, you were on pure essences and they were babies. But
Sure.
It is fun to mess with your role.
Don't take my
in
thunder.
Delibram,
Oh, yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Anything else?
Wow.
No, not for
All
me.
right.
No.
All right, we're gonna rapid fire do our goodbyes then. Hello, goodbye. I'm Zenidra. You can find me on Twitax at Zenidra_A. I'm on Blue Sky at Zenidra. Sometimes, maybe, not really. On Twitch, I'm Strawberry Pop. Also, we have plus the word one, the number shot the word, with underscores on Twitch, without underscores on YouTube. That is a D&D podcast that Aldina and I and a couple of other friends do. We have like 5 billion different shows and 5 different games, and one where we sometimes just talk about D&D instead. That is a thing that we do. And now it is Charles' turn.
Hi, hello, I'm Aldino. I'm here and only here because I'm not actually a content creator, I guess. Anyway.
You're here. You made this content.
Yeah, this is the one. Also on plus word, one, the number shot the word. And very soon we'll have another unhinged read about the TTRPG because I'm just collecting information for now. But yeah, that's me.
Is it my turn? Hello, I'm Rook.
Yeah.
You can find me on twitch.tv Rookery. That's ROOKURI. You can find me on YouTube at the same and on Twitter at Rookery_. I'm also just Rookery on Blue Sky. I do not use it yet, but it's there, and one day I might. That's
I believe it.
me. But we had our wonderful guests with us as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. Who are we starting off with, Zenidra? Who's our?
I'm gonna do Gamerscape really quick.
Oh, Gamerscape! Oh gosh! Yeah. Sneak it in!
Yeah. All right. You can email us, like the 3 of us, and also sometimes Fusion, at aetheryteradio@gamerscape.com. You can find us on Twitax at Aetheryte Radio and Blue Sky at Aetheryte Radio. Also, Twitter, Blue Sky, Facebook, Twitch. Obviously, if you're on Twitch or YouTube, you know you can also find us. All of those, Gamerscape. Woo! And we have a Discord, discord.gg/Gamerscape. Come talk to us about stuff and things and stuff. As Rook was saying, we had 2 wonderful guests. Where can we find you guys, and what are you up to? Alchemy.
Okay, fine.
I was going to say,
I'll
you're
go
first.
My name is Alchamee. You can find me mostly on Twitch and Twitter, Blue Sky, and TikTok, and soon YouTube. All under Alchemy or some form thereof. I think Twitter is the only one that's different with like a 1 because my name was taken.
For those of you who are listening, it's ALCHAMEE. Cool. Extra credits, Will.
Okay. Hi. Well, I'm the Twitch overlord over at Extra Credits. Yes, we have a Twitch channel in addition to all of the YouTube content we make where I host talk shows and podcasts about game design and politics through a game designer lens. And we talk about gaming news of the week. You'll find me playing all kinds of variety games, From Honkai Star Rail to Final Fantasy XIV to Balatro. I do a little bit of everything. You can find me over there five days a week at twitch.tv/extra credits. You can also find my thoughts over on Blue Sky at What Will I Play. And yeah, that's me.
All right, guys. That has been us for today. Thanks again so much, you guys, for joining us. This has been a great discussion. And thank you,
So much
chat,
fun.
for hanging out. You guys had so much to help with this discussion with. It was great. We will be... You know what? We're not sure if we're going to be back next week. If we're back next week, it might be tanks. We'll figure it out. We'll let you know. We will or will not see you there. But goodbye.
Yeah.
Bye.